No. All right. Thank you for joining. And let's begin. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the 2022 International Bioremediation Conference. My name is Carol Liu, and I am from Arizona State University in the United States. And with me here today are Liz and Avery from TecCEM in Mexico, and Katerina from the University of Patras in Greece. We are all part of iGEM, which stands for the International Genetically Engineered Machines Competition. While iGEM wants to promote solutions to many kinds of problems throughout synthetic biology, our teams are focused on environmental issues, which I am sure that you guys here today are all passionate about. We'll have a full agenda of speakers and project pitches throughout this morning or night, depending on where you are, talking about everything from how to identify remediation strategies for a contaminated site to how we can work with many non-human organisms to clean up our soil and water, and to even how bioremediation ties in to the global implications of climate change. We hope that you will all be inspired by today's topics, and please do ask any questions to all our wonderful speakers and raise any topics to discuss. We'll have time reserved at the end also for this free discussion. Okay, and here is our agenda for today. So we'll begin with an introductory speech, followed by Kelly Hermanson, followed by the project pitch, and then speaker, pitch, speaker, pitch. And thank you all. All right, so without any more delay, let's talk about bioremediation. What exactly is bioremediation? Well, first you have to have something to remediate or to fix. And what is that? An environmental problem in the world, and usually one that is persistent. We have many to choose from: oil spills, chemical runoff from agriculture and mine sites that can pollute our waterways, toxic metals in the ground that make people sick, plastic waste that does not degrade and kills all kinds of creatures when they build up. Here you see an oil spill in the water, which can happen when we transport petroleum from one place to another. This kind of problem can be devastating and leave environments very difficult to inhabit for a long time, because the oil on the surface can coat birds, feathers, and animals' fur, making them unable to shed water and so drown and freeze. And the animals living inside the waters can be stunted in growth or even die because of oil's toxicity. To remove the oil, in the past, remediation strategies are generally burning the oil surface, literally setting it on fire, or using boats to skim the surface to try to clean it, to dumping in a bunch of chemical dispersants to break down the oil. Well, all these interventions cause their own side effects. Yet here you see this picture from Purdue University that shows how microbes have been added into the spill, which degrades the hydrocarbons. And this is the real key of bioremediation. If an organism can take something that is naturally harmful and turn it into something harmless, or at least to store it away where it is removed from the environment, we can cooperate with them and clean our land, clean our water much more naturally and with far fewer side effects. Overall, the two main areas of environmental contamination targeted by bioremediation are land and soil contamination, and a lot of these contaminants overlap: chemical fertilizer, heavy metals, nuclear waste, pesticides, herbicides, biological waste, and more. Everything from mine sites to farmlands to factories all produce contaminants, And what we ask is, could these be addressed with biological solutions? So if you search bioremediation in the news, you'll find that it's rapidly gaining interest with researchers and communities from all over beginning to take it more into account. What are some of the reasons that it's gaining this interest? Well, first, it's less intrusive and more sustainable. Some remediation strategies require the use of harsh chemicals or excavation, especially places like mine sites where contaminated soil is dumped out. And this leaves a very overturned ecosystem behind. With living organisms, you can reduce the large-scale equipment needed to process contaminants and produce fewer harmful waste products or side effects, or so is the general trend at least. This also means that there is less energy input needed to process the contaminants, since the organisms can sustain themselves. And so this technology is more renewable and more sustainable. This self-sustaining and self-replicating process can also make bioremediation very scalable, since we can leave the organisms to their own work to grow and continue functioning as long as they need, rather than needing manpower at every single step. So why is bioremediation not used more often? One main issue is that sometimes natural biological pathways just don't really exist to deal with particular contaminants. Or if it does exist, the effect is too marginal to be economically feasible, or at least something that people would want to push for. But synthetic biology, which is what iGEM is focused on, where humans can modify and add new inputs to an organism's genome, we can possibly expand the pathways for bioremediation farther than ever, target more focused chemicals, and amplify existing effects in normal biological pathways. Of course, there are challenges and risks still, ranging from increased cost due to engineering the organism and implementing increased safety measures, which also requires navigating more legal requirements, and ethical concerns. Yet researchers from all over the world, including our iGEM teams, continue to make this work with the goal of bioremediation for a cleaner, more sustainable future. All right, with that, I'll hand it off to Audrey to quickly give us a recap on what is iGEM.
Well, then, as Carol commented, running into this area of opportunity comes the iGEM Foundation, an independent nonprofit organization dedicated to advancing synthetic biology, education, and competition, as well as the development of an open, collaborative, and cooperative community.
In this way, it annually organizes an international synthetic biology competition, where teams of multidisciplinary students from all around the world compete for medals and prizes by designing, building, and testing projects using cutting-edge SynBio. Teams document their work through deliverables such as wikis, videos, and presentations, and are judged by experts judging panels. In this environment, teams create projects from start to finish, from brainstorming to proof of concept. The projects aim to have a positive impact and solve real-world problems in the local community. These resolutions can be focused on different fields, from healthcare to agriculture. Inspired in this work and with the aim of contributing to this development of this initiative, this conference is being held, where will we have the opportunity to learn about different approaches and advances that the scientific community has in water care. With that, I return the word to Carol, and we begin with our first speaker.
All right, thank you, Audrey. And let's introduce our first speaker. Kelly Hermanson has a bachelor's degree of science from geology at ASU. She is an Arizona registered geologist specializing in hydrology with over 18 years of experience. Her passion for hydrogeology has provided her opportunities to work on a range of projects from the Arctic Circle to the Amazon rainforest. Kelly is proud to call Arizona her home and to continue applying her expertise to the Watershed Improvement Unit at the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality. Her talk today will be, I'll let her introduce it. Kelly, if you would like to share your screen.
Yeah, let me make sure. You guys can hear me okay? All right. And let me know if you can see my screen.
It is all good.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for having me. As Carol said, my name is Kelly Hermanson. I'm with the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality. I work on the Watershed Improvement Team. So the environmental areas of concern that we are remediating, the media is water that we're remediating. My talk is about Big Bug Creek remediation, the source identification, and background characterization. So first off, I want to give you a quick outline of the topics I'll be covering, an introduction about Big Bug Creek, talk about the remediation goals, discuss the source identification process, and the background characterization, which is currently in progress, and then review potential remediation options, which are preliminary, and then our next steps. So Big Bug Creek is located in central Arizona, just southeast of Prescott in the Bradshaw Mountains. It flows southeast to the Agua Fria River, which flows south. Hopefully you guys can see my cursor. I'm tracing the path of the water flow. And then flows south to the Agua Fria River, which is just west of Phoenix. It joins the Gila River and then flows west where it meets up with the Colorado River and flows south to Mexico into the Sea of Cortez. So let's talk about our remediation goals. What is it about Big Bug Creek that needs to be remediated? According to AZDEQ's 2022 assessment report, the headwaters of Big Bug Creek to the confluence of Eugene Gulch are impaired for cadmium and zinc. The rest of the creek downstream from Eugene Gulch to the confluence of the Agua Fria River is impaired for arsenic, copper, and lead. And this is based on the assessment monitoring that AZDEQ performs on a statewide basis regularly throughout the year to check on the health and wellness of the state's rivers and lakes. So for source identification, we want to start with a desktop study. We're going to start looking at the headwaters of Big Bug Creek and just focus on the upper impairments of cadmium and zinc. We want to try to identify the sources of the metals loading along this segment of the creek. So we initially identify sources by performing this desktop study and evaluating the land for any active or inactive mine sites, any discharging facilities. We look at the land ownership, the geologic and hydrologic setting, and review the existing water quality data. The desktop study indicated that the former Money Metal mine and the Pollen mine are sources of metals loading. Both are legacy mine sites that have not been active for over 70 years. The Money Metals mine has a previously abandoned mine shaft that needs to be repaired and a waste rock pile. And the Poland mine has a waste rock pile as well as a discharging tunnel that flows constantly throughout the year. And that's named the Poland Walker Tunnel. So after we've done our desktop study, we want to ground truth our potential sources. So first we made sure to get proper access to the site. The Poland site is on private property, so we have an access agreement with that landowner. And then we want to perform an initial site visit to take inventory of the features that we can observe at the site. Based on our initial site visit, we create a work plan to perform surface water monitoring, soil sampling, waste rock pile sampling, to more discreetly identify each sources of contamination coming from these sites. So the next step then is background characterization, and this is where we're currently at. We're in our 10th month now of monitoring the background characterization. We started by developing a site-specific sampling and analysis plan to create targeted sampling locations to characterize these impacts for 1 full year. Our sampling and analysis plan also lists all of the field and analytical laboratory parameters that we want to collect at each sampling location. We want to make sure that we're monitoring field pH and ORP, the oxidation reduction potential of the water. This is where understanding pH and ORP is useful to understand what controls the solubility of the parameters that we're trying to remediate. And then using this data will help us estimate the loadings from each site. And then this data will help determine the next steps in remediation and guide us to the most effective type of remediation. So we have some preliminary results that I wanted to share with you. This is water quality results collected from the monitoring sites that we've outlined in our sampling and analysis plan. The vertical axis is a cadmium concentration in milligrams per liter. And then the horizontal axis is the river mile from the mouth. And this graph only has river mile 23 through 29 because we're just capturing that portion of Big Bug Creek, that upper portion that's impaired for cadmium and zinc. Each line on this graph represents a monitoring event, and the dates are provided in legend. The horizontal dashed red line is one of the water quality standards for cadmium, and the value on this graph is in 6,000 milligrams per liter. And you can see that the samples collected from the tunnel, that's the MgPWT 0.7, and the tunnel runoff, MgPWT 0.01, are the major sources of cadmium loading. The fluctuation in concentration is primarily due to precipitation. The more that it rains, that increases the flow rate, and the concentration also increases instead of diluting it, which is what we had hoped. You can see concentrations can exceed 10 times the surface water quality standard during storm events and 3 times the standard during base flow events. So looking at some preliminary remediation options, we look at a variety of alternatives, and then we evaluate each alternative for effectiveness, implementability, and cost. One alternative is to do nothing. And right now that's not a good option because we're currently exceeding surface water quality standards. Another alternative is to implement just institutional controls, like fencing to prevent human access to the mine impacted waters or these waste rock piles. Another is to implement engineering controls, which would include at the Money Metals mine, repairing that mine shaft plug and then cap and cover the waste rock pile and revegetate the clean cover. At the Poland mine, we would also want to consider capping and covering the waste rock pile and revegetating the clean cover. But our biggest problem is this constantly discharging tunnel. Options for the tunnel remediation would be maybe some type of flow-through bulkhead or a concrete plug, or possibly a passive treatment system. And so this is where bioremediation is kind of coming into play with this project. We're exploring the possibility of a type of passive treatment technology that could be implemented at the Poland Walker Tunnel site that would include a biochemical reactor, or BCR, to precipitate metals as sulfides. The BCR would contain an organic substrate that would be a mixture of manure, because bacteria from cow stomachs is a source of that bacteria, wood chips or walnuts or pecan shells, because this is what the bacteria would feed on and it breaks down slowly. The substrate would also include hay or sawdust, because that also is what the bacteria feeds on, but it breaks down quickly. And then if we had acidic water, which is really common in sites, AMD, acid mine drainage, we would also want to add limestone to the substrate, but in this case, the discharge, the tunnel discharge is actually alkaline. So I don't think we would need limestone in the substrate if we were to implement this remedy at Poland Walker Tunnel. However, a passive treatment system is not a remedy that you can just implement and walk away from. There would be ongoing monitoring and maintenance. We would have to routinely sample the influent and effluent to make sure that the system is working. We'd have to monitor the substrate and then also periodically replace the substrate. So maybe next year, I might be able to talk to you guys about implementing a biochemical reactor to treat the discharge from Poland Walker Tunnel. But for now, we're still collecting data to inform us on the most effective remediation option. So our next steps, because there would be long-term inspections and maintenance with a passive treatment technology, we have to ask ourselves, is this what we want to do? We circle back to our remediation goals, which are to meet water quality standards for Big Bug Creek. If we remediate the existing rock piles contributing to the metals loading and leave the tunnel discharge alone, would that allow Big Bug Creek to meet water quality standards? Or can we develop some kind of, this is where I'm at, these are the kinds of questions I'm asking myself. Can we develop some type of model using our background characterization data to simulate what the estimated water quality in Big Bug Creek would be like if we remediated sections at a time? Can we reach our goals? So this last slide is just kind of a bonus slide, and it's fun to share. We have a game camera set up at the tunnel discharge site, and here's some of the critters that we've caught on our game camera. AZDEQ's mission is to protect and enhance the public health and the environment. And so these are some of the little guys that we're providing a healthy environment for. You can see there was a bear that visited the site on August 7th in the afternoon. And then at night, this is a honey badger that visited the tunnel. Then over here is a little fox that we were able to capture. So I just wanted to share that with everyone. So thank you. Here's my contact information. Thank you for letting me share the cool things that we're doing right now at Big Bug Creek. And I'll take any questions if you guys have them.
All right, thank you, Kelly. If anyone has any questions, you can just unmute and speak or type them in the chat and I'll read them aloud. But first, starting off, Kelly, in the biochemical reactor that you're thinking about implementing, how would do you know if the waste would be broken down into something harmless, or would you still, would AZDEQ still need to collect the leftovers and ship it off or bury it underground?
It would depend on how rapidly the metals would precipitate out of solution. they could produce a sludge that might back up the system. If that were the case, they would have to be excavated or removed from the site and then hauled off site and disposed of appropriately.
All right. Do we have any questions from the speaker? I mean, the audience? I do have another one.
Okay.
Another question is, in terms of, taking the time to characterize a site, and this is a historical site, so of course the contamination has been there for a long time.
Yes.
But how often would the AZDEQ see perhaps a site that has a crisis need? And do we respond differently in terms of like a sudden spill or a big environmental catastrophe?
Yes, AZDEQ does respond differently, and they do have a prioritization when it comes to the water bodies that we're remediating, and that is detailed in the, I had a link to the report on this slide. How AZDEQ prioritizes the water bodies to be remediated is explained in this assessment report. And then as far as environmental disasters, AZDEQ has a completely separate team that will address those in a timely manner. A lot of them are veterans that they've hired who are used to really high pressure situations to be deployed in a quick manner and address things promptly and in an organized way. So yeah, there are different responses depending on the extent of the pollution and the crisis at hand, yes.
All right, thank you for your answer. Are there any questions from the audience?
Okay, I think now it's fine. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, now I sorted out the issue. I'm sorry about this. Actually, signing in from 2 devices is already a mess. Okay, so I have one question from Dr. Kelly. Kelly, if there is an environmental disaster, I'm talking about flash floods specifically. So the land is like, it has a very bad impact on cultivational land, or we can say agricultural land. So how bioremediation can help that land towards the sustainability? Like, is there any solution? Like, are there any microorganisms, like if we can use them to maintain the life of that very specific land that is under the disaster of floods? Though it's not relevant, but I because you people are very expert of bioremediation, so I wanted to ask this from you.
Yeah, so part of my job is to make sure I'm aware of the bioremediation options available to us to consider for each of our remediation projects. And then making sure we're collecting the right background information to inform us, is this a good match for our site? Would this be the most effective solution? Because cost is actually not the deciding factor. The department wants something that's permanent and what is best for the environment. So if there are solutions out there, we want to know about that so we can implement them for our sites. And one of the major sources of contamination in Arizona are these abandoned mine lands. We have thousands of them. Hey.
Thank you, Kelly. All right, do we have any other questions? Okay, well, if that's all, thank you again, Kelly, for sharing these steps on how we can characterize and remediate. And all right, so now if you want to stay, we would really appreciate that, or if you'd like to leave, that's fine too. But we will get back to the presentation. So before our next speaker speaks, we're just going to I'm going to give a quick presentation on what does Arizona State University's iGEM team do. So our project is called Clammy-Demone AS. So what is this? Is bioengineering for clean water, particularly clean from arsenic. What is the problem we face? As Kelly mentioned, Arizona has a lot of arsenic contamination. What is arsenic? Arsenic is a heavy metal that is highly toxic in its inorganic forms, and also in its organic forms, but more in the forms of arsenite and arsenate. It inhibits growth, photosynthesis in plants, and also reproduction in animals, humans, and pretty much any living organism. And the toxicity is so high that 1 gram, less than 1 gram, can kill most adults. And it affects mostly low-income areas and wealth. So what are some of the health impacts of arsenic? When arsenic is introduced to a person, usually through their drinking water, or could also be vaporized also, but mostly through drinking water, it can lead to poor cognition, skin rashes and lesions, they use it to wash, nausea and vomiting, they drink it, cancer and muscle weakness as a long-term effect, and diarrhea, liver failure, and even death. These are extremely toxic effects. Around the globe, arsenic contamination levels are varied, but we can see that some of the main areas of concern are here in the central United States and also in the state of Arizona, as well as in the Indian Peninsula and parts of Australia, and really spread around the world. Of course, there's many areas of the world that have very little arsenic data as well, because it is, again, usually in very trace amounts, but still very dangerous. So our team is concerned about arsenic contamination, particularly because we come from the state of Arizona in the United States, where arsenic contamination actually is severely over our Environmental Protection Agency guidelines in several areas, such as in the Yavapai County and up here in the north on the Navajo Reservation. These areas, again, are places that are generally lower income, more rural, and depend on wells to supply their groundwater and water source. So the solution our team is exploring is bioremediation. So meet Clammy-Demonis reinhardtii. So Chlamydomonas is a green microalgae chassis that has natural heavy metal uptake abilities. What that means is it can bind to arsenite and put it into its vacuole, which is kind of the storage area, and that will allow it to be removed from the water. It is unicellular, but it is eukaryotic and a phototrope. Again, meaning it exists as a single cell organism, but it also performs photosynthesis and has a nucleus and all of that. So why we chose this organism, other than its heavy metal uptake abilities, is that it has been used again for a lot of laboratory work in the past and is well characterized in that way. So how are we combating the problem with clammy? The genes that we have introduced in our project are ACR2P, which is called arsenic reductase, allowing the algae to reduce arsenate, which is one of the forms of toxic arsenic, into arsenite, which the clammy can uptake. And then PCS is the phytochelatin synthase, which allows the algae to take the toxic arsenic up into the cell's vacuole. And you can see here, this is the pathway by which we hope to take out the inorganic forms of arsenite from the water into the algae's body. So arsenite, which is AS3, and arsenate, which is AS5. After it comes into the cell, arsenite can just simply bind into the GCS, followed by that into the PC synthase, and be stored into the vacuole, while the arsenate would be first reduced with the ACR2P genes products, and then go through the pathway and be stored in the cell's vacuole. So in synthetic biology, of course, our main creation is editing this genome so that it can actually accomplish all of these tasks. So we have, of course, a section of promoter and terminator, between which we construct our genes. The first gene of interest is that PCS, which is what does the main functional work, and then the ACR2P. And to make sure that all of the organisms that we are creating actually have these genes, this is also attached to an antibacterial gene that allows us to select for these cells. And one of the most important parts of our construct is actually these connecting particles, these 2A peptides. We are using TAV and FMDV. So what are 2A peptides? They are relatively new, but literature has shown that they can allow for multi-gene expression in the nucleus. Usually, as an mRNA or copied from a DNA passes through, the ribosome, it will produce one protein or just express until the terminator. But if we do not have these 2A peptides and you try to combine multiple genes, you're just going to end up with a long string of nonsense that cannot actually fold into the correct proteins that can be used. But with these 2A peptides, our goal is to expand the horizon for bioremediation, expand our possibilities for combinations of genes to become even more targeted and specific and multifunctional. So we have been able to successfully combine the 2A peptides with these genes of interest. And of course, with the flags there too, so that we can see that the genes are indeed inside the construct. And we are currently in the process of making sure that all the genes are actually functional. So what is our goal for implementation? Well, we envision something that allows for algae growth, clammy growth, to be very high and sustainable. Would like to be able to operate under a batch process that allows the algae to fully uptake the arsenic while also being as efficient as possible, so that a arsenic contaminated site can have a solution quickly. It must, of course, be efficient, because otherwise, if very little water is filtered, there are other arsenic removal strategies out there that may better serve the needs of the community. Of course, there's biocontainment, which we want our algae to remain inside the system, especially because it is genetically modified and there are certain stipulations that come with that area. We would like our dimensions to be reasonable so that the cost of implementation could potentially be minimal and also be efficient. And of course, the most important part is managing the concentrated toxic arsenic waste that would be stored into the cells. So our overall design for this is a filtration system where, over here in the yellow, contaminated groundwater from sites that have characterized arsenic contamination would be pumped into a detoxification chamber, which is supplied from this darker green algae growth chamber. And these are connected so that the water can remain with the algae until they uptake, hopefully, all of the arsenic from the water, which then will be transported to a disc stack centrifuge, which will separate the saturated algal cells from the liquid media that they are grown in. And also so that down here, we can contain the algae. I mean, not the algae, but the concentrated arsenic waste. So of course, the removal of the water would then be passed through an activated carbon filter and leave only clean, purified water behind. There are many parts of the system, and this is only a rough schematic, but this is the overall goal: using the algae to decontaminate groundwater from arsenic. And of course, to some considerations to keep our algae happy and healthy and living, doing their job, is there's also supply tanks for carbon dioxide gas so that the algae can perform photosynthesis, and the TAP medium, which provides all the nutrients that they would need to grow. Right. Then this is a CAD model of what potentially could be a more high-end, expensive way of implementing this, where it is similar to a greenhouse design, where the algae would be in clear tubes that can absorb sunlight so they can do their job of uptaking arsenic while still growing. And what are some of the benefits of using bioremediation in this case? Well, instead of having to just use an inorganic filter, which needs to be removed and every time remanufactured, the goal is to have a long-term solution. Because algae itself can keep replicating, keep growing as long as they have the nutrients, well, the amount that it's not all of the contaminated water going into all of the algae at once, but always having algae continuing to grow and multiply after we've put in the genes of interest so that they can continue doing their job as long as necessary. All right, well, thank you for listening to this project pitch. And if you have any questions, you can type them in the chat. We'll probably address them at the end. And of course, you can always contact us at asuigem2022@gmail.com. Follow us on Instagram at asuigem. With that, I'll hand it off to Katerina to introduce our next speaker.
Okay, hello everyone. We're introducing the second speaker of our conference. So we're going to have a speech about SDGs and agriculture, and more specifically, how climate change is affecting agriculture. I'm going to now give the floor to our speaker. We are very glad to have you here today, and it's a very big honor for all the teams. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here. I'm really happy to join you people as speaker, and I'll be talking about the impact of climate change on agriculture. I'll be talking about Sustainable Development Goal number 13 in general, and climate action, climate sustainable development goal number 13 in particular. So we will be looking after the impact of climate change on agriculture, and we will be looking after the perspective, this scenario in different perspectives. So here you can see one of my pictures. So actually I'm sitting in the lake, and when I was a child, and it was full of water, and we used to go there for fishing, and we enjoy the sound of water. But you can see the situation of that lake. It's a very famous point, and if you want to explore the previous pictures, you can go to Google and you can write Hanna Lake. So you can see the impact of the disastrous impact of climate change, how it's affecting those countries specifically who they are not the very big contributor of global greenhouse gas emissions. But if we talk about the sufferers or the sufferings, then these countries will be on the top. So we will be moving towards our next slides, because next slides are even more interesting. Okay, so sustainable development goals. I think we all are researchers, because we are here, we are giving our time to research, to bioremediation, and it's a responsibility to learn what are sustainable development goals, and what is the responsibility of the individuals. How can we play our part if we want to protect our planet Earth from these climate challenges, from these climate changes. So what are the sustainable development goals? I'll be discussing, I'll be taking 2 or 3 minutes on this particular slide, because sustainable development goals, SDGs, also known as the global goals, were adopted by all the United Nations member states in 2015 as a universal call to action to end poverty, protect planet, and ensure that all people enjoy peace and prosperity by 2030. So there are 17 goals, as you can see in this slide, and that is like they are recognized that action in one area will affect outcomes in other, and that development must balance social, economic, and environmental sustainability. And environmental sustainability, I have to repeat it, because this is the most important responsibility towards sustainability. If you want to live, or if you want to really take care about planet Earth, then we have to look after a few things with greater courage. through the pledge to leave no one behind, because I love this quote of leaving no one behind, countries have committed to fast track progress for the furthest behind first. So everyone is needed to reach these ambitious targets. The creativity, know-how, technology, and financial resources from all of the society is necessary to achieve the sustainable development goals in every context. So I have encircled this sustainable development goal number 13 that is particularly addresses the climate action. About today's topic, so what we are going to discuss, so discussing what's weather and climate, and then some effects of climate change, what is greenhouse gas effect, and look deeply in the threefold of then
Oh dear. All right. Think your internet might have broken for a second. Are you still able to share your screen?
okay, so I issues at my home, so I'll try to like cope up with these things. Okay, so in the coming decades, climate change and other global trends will, endanger agriculture, food security, and rural livelihood. Okay, I have to show you one slide that is from another, because I want some attention from all the participants on this particular slide.
Try clicking one time.
Okay. Yeah. So I want all the participants to look into this slide like deeply, because it's very important. Okay, so I think we so it's because it was melting and what Earth is like, facing. Okay, once we talk about the global climate target, I think it's been revised twice or thrice. So I think participants now understanding what I'm just trying to make them understand. Actually, this is all about the global warming. There are greenhouse gases that are important, because they have, they are just like a blanket around our planet Earth, and they are of Earth in which life is. Anthropogenic activities are and these anthropogenic activities Okay. Meanwhile, oh God. Actually, I want to switch on to my previous slides, but the internet connectivity is not helping me out. And I'm really thankful to all the participants for being very patient to me. Okay, you can see a picture in the in and you can see there because there
No. Could you try closing your video perhaps so that we can hear you better? Might be taking up some of the bandwidth. Sorry, you're currently muted.
Okay. I'm really sorry about it. I'm really sorry about it. Okay, I'll be, because I have taken so much time, so I'll be a bit quicker while explaining what is like climate change and how it's affecting the agriculture in particular. So what is the difference between weather and climate? Though I think most of the participants have already know what's the difference between climate and weather, but I'll repeat because it will be easier for all of us to know to analyze the impact of climate change on agriculture if we keep in view the difference between weather and climate. So climate is something very constant. Like this is something that is constantly changing, and a signal indicating that evaluated over the range of temporal and spatial scales. And like then it's area change rapidly. Difficult. There might be rain to
Excuse me, Dr. Khan, I believe that your microphone connection has been lost.
Okay. So I was talking about weather and climate. So there is a difference between weather and climate. If we talk about weather, it's a very short-term seasonal pattern. And if we talk about the long-term seasonal pattern, then it's climate. So this is the difference between climate and, weather. If I talk about my region, I'm living in the arid zone, and I have shown you the picture of very flash floods in my area, and there were non-stop rain, monsoon rain. Because if I talk about particularly my area, I'm here with all of you from Balochistan, Pakistan. So we are living in the arid zone, and there are no monsoon in our zone. But just because of the climate change, we have been facing the flash floods just because unstoppable monsoon. So so global climate change, we have like discussed already what is weather, what is climate. So if we talk about like global climate change, so it's identifiable change in the climate of Earth as a whole that lasts for an extended period of time, like decades or longer. So when due to natural processes, it is usually referred to as the global climate variabilities, usually referred to changes forced by human activities. I'm talking about anthropogenic activities, as the speaker that who she was like talking before me, she was talking about the bioremediation. So I'm looking forward the bioremedial solution towards like climate change, because climate we can see the oil sippages, we can see heavy metal, because what human beings are doing, they are dumping their waste in the fresh water and ocean water, and without keeping in view like what's going on with the aquatic system or the overall ecosystem of oceans, and how the species and how we are losing the biodiversity, and how the environment is becoming challenging for all the species to live in the polluted environment. Okay, climate change. Most of us known about the biotic and abiotic factor, but usually we relate all the abiotic factor with the non-living part and biotic factor with the living part. But today we will be like looking into biotic and abiotic parts in the different contexts. Like if I talk about the abiotic part, then there are the ocean currents and the solar radiations, evaporation, and the volcanic activities. And if I talk about the biotic factors, then we have to keep in view, like if we have to forget about the animals, we have to forget about the plants or any biodiversity that exists on planet Earth. We have to keep in view the transpiration that's going on, and the respiration, and the photosynthesis, and the decomposition. So these are something that are done by the biotic factors, and abiotic factors that are contributing in the climate change. These both are the parts that are contributing in climate change. Okay, so we will be looking after some effects of climate change. So an average increase of Earth's temperature during the last century, and I have shown you one animation before during the presentation, but I was having interrupted internet, and I hope most of the participants were able to look at that specific animation in which we were like observing like how ice age was going on, and how ice was melting, and we have lost these resources of fresh water. We are living in the age of industrialization, though there are so many benefits of industrialization, but this so-called industrialization and the journey of human beings toward the development that caused climate change, and that is contributing in the rapid increase of Earth's temperature. Though the rise and fall of this Earth's temperature was it was present in the history of Earth, and it was very normal. But you can see that normality, like we have lost the ice, like we are not living in the ice age. We have lost most of the ice, and our polar bears, like just because of the melting of polar ice, polar bears are and the other animals are drowning. And like if I talk about specifically my people right now, because there is extreme situation of flash floods, and my people are also drowning. So these are the some effects. I put on maximum pictures from recent scenarios of what's going on here around me, because I want to grab the attention of all the participants and all the scientists who are working on they're researching, and they're working. So I want them to what I want to just to I want them to have some solutions of these climate changes. So then
it's not just about the melting of polar ice, or our sea level is continuously rising. And just because of our sea level is continuously rising, so what's happening are so many cities are continuously drowning. Migration of birds are migrating, because birds are forced to migrate to change their time and place of migration. Then melting of glaciers will lead to higher sea level, as I have mentioned before, which will cause floods and put many low elevation regions at risk of disappearing underwater. I'm talking about specifically the coastal cities, because they are near the oceans, and whatever ice is melting from wherever region in the on planet Earth, the sea level will continuously be rising. So longer summers, I'm here living in the arid zone, and we were having longer winters, but recently we are having longer summers, though our region is don't exist in particularly monsoon, or we are not living in the plains. I live in the mountainous area, but we are having the longer summers, and they can disrupt the animal habitation, new and widespread diseases because of the warm climate, then damages of crops due to sudden climate change and flood, increased precipitation, and then the drought, heat waves, hurricanes, extreme winters, storms, and more wildfires. I would like to mention here that my province have been facing extreme drought since last 15 years. And now, just because of the climate change, we suddenly have flash floods. And just because there were uninterrupted rainfall, I don't know from where this monsoon came here in my region, and everything is gone. We were living here for 18 days without water, 3 days without electricity. Mobile connections were there were no mobile connections and internet for 11 days, and we were purchasing LPG gas from bazaar, because all the pipelines were gone. This extreme flood was there. So and still internet is not because just because of the flash flood we have recently faced. So I think participants will be understanding what I'm actually. Questions of different sectors to climate changes. I have been sharing with all of you that there have been greenhouse gases, and greenhouse gas emissions were
No?
the okay, I want Carol, I have I have shared the link of presentation with you on WhatsApp. Can you play the presentation on my behalf, please?
Sure. Where did you send it? Sorry, let me see you. Did you send it as a link in the chat or somewhere else? Could you please send the link again? I don't see it in the chat, unfortunately. Oh,
I have sent you in the chat and WhatsApp both. So if you can
okay.
read it.
Perfect. Oh,
Yes,
sure.
I have already shared.
Okay. Thank you for your patience, everybody.
Yes, and I'm really feeling very embarrassed right now. It's not me, it's just the internet, and I
Yeah.
don't want it to. Yeah.
No, it is completely understandable. We all face internet issues in this current place. All right. Were you here?
It's slide number 10.
10. Okay. So, okay. There we go.
Yes, thank you. Next, if you can go to the next slide. Okay, and next slide. One more next.
All right.
Okay.
I'm currently on slide 12.
Okay, so what is the, I think it's one more next, because we were talking about the global house emissions, how different sectors are contributing in greenhouse gas emissions. Okay, okay. So we were talking about the greenhouse gas effect. Okay. Okay. So what we have, what's going on planet Earth, except you know, this internet instability, it's climate change, and it's the emission of global greenhouse gas emissions. And in this graph, you can clearly see like what's like going on. So what human beings are doing, or like what is the contributor, how anthropogenic activities are you know, multiplying the natural composition of greenhouse gas emissions. So we have multiplied many folds these greenhouse gas emissions. So here we can see. Okay, so I'll try once again, if I can like do that. Okay.
If you would like, maybe you can share the screen and then just turn off your video. Sometimes that helps. Would you like me to continue sharing the screen?
Yes, I think it's working now. Okay, because we were having like clashes of slides, that's why I wanted to like try once again. Okay, so the contribution of different sectors of to climate change. So you can see like energy supply, it contributes the most. It's 25.9%, and then we can see the transportation. It's the contribution of global greenhouse gas emission from the transport sector is 13.1%, and then the residential and commercial buildings are contributing 7.9%. And you can see the industrial part. We can see and we can clearly clearly see that energy supply is 25.9%, and the industrial part is contributing 19.4% in the total global greenhouse gas emissions. And then we can see the agriculture, it's 13.5, and it's like pretty noticeable. And then the forestry, it's 17.4%, and then the waste waste and wastewater is contributing 2.8%. So global warming is when the earth heat up and the temperature increases. More recently, the temperature have been rising, causing more dangers for people, animals, plants, and our environment. So here we can see like greenhouse gas effect is when the temperature goes up on Earth, since the sun's heat and light energy is trapped in the Earth atmosphere. While the heat from the sun enters our atmosphere, the heat has trouble leaving like back out of like atmosphere. It's similar like if you park your car under the sun, and then the temperature of Earth, you will be clearly you will be unable to sit in your car back. So similarly, these things are happening to our planet Earth because of the global greenhouse gas effect and these emissions, the temperature of Earth is continuously rising. So global greenhouse gas emissions. So here we can see the journey of global greenhouse gas emissions contribution since 1990 to 2010, and you can see that in 1990s, okay, there are different gases. First of all, we have to understand what's green color is mentioning, and then what's like orange color is trying to say, and then what is yellow color is mentioning, and the other colors. So green color is representing carbon dioxide gas, and then the orange is methane, representing methane, and yellow is representing nitrous oxides, and then we can see the last about chlorofluorocarbons. And you can clearly see that since 1990s towards 2010, it's continuously rising. We are continuously contributing in the greenhouse gas emission effects. So you can see, we can see in the history, and here you can see that there were no global greenhouse gas emissions and global warming because there were no industrial era. We were living because human beings are passing through different revolutions. First of all, we were living in the Stone Age, and then there was agricultural revolution, and then there were industrial revolution. Things have changed after the industrial revolution, and just because of the industrial revolution, the contribution of greenhouse gas emissions have been multiplied many folds, and just because of that, you can see the graph is continuously rising. So here you can see the graph is continuously rising. If you can see my cursor, then you can clearly see this one. And then if we talk about the recent past, I'm really happy just because of many summits. Like I would love to mention the Rio de Janeiro and then the Paris summit, in which people, all the countries around the world, they realized what's going on, because they have felt what global warming is, and this is contributing in the climate change. And it will be difficult for us if we didn't take any step, and if we don't realize even just by our individual efforts and community efforts, and national and international level, then it will be very difficult for us to overcome these issues and challenges. Okay, agriculture and climate change, as I have share with all of you in the objectives or of these slides previously. So we will be discussing these three folds. So the agriculture, first of all, we will be looking like agriculture as a contributor to climate change. How? We will be looking into this in the next slide, and then we will be seeing the impact of climate change on agriculture. First of all, like agriculture contribution in climate change, and then the impact of climate change on agriculture. And the third one is the agriculture as a potential moderator of climate change. Okay, so 60 to 70% more food we need by 2050 in order to meet the demands, because the population of Earth is continuously rising. Just because of the population of Earth is continuously rising, so there is definitely direct demand of food supply. And if we talk about sustainable development goals, then we have to keep in view the first and second goal, that is about no poverty and zero hunger. If we want to achieve that zero hunger, then we have to control these climate changes. All these sustainable development goals are interlinked, and if you want to achieve a single goal, then you have to make sure that all rest of the goals are you are also working on the rest of the goals. If you miss even a single goal, then you may not be able to achieve all these 17 sustainable development goals by 2030. So the responsibility on our shoulder is continuously rising. So what are the current issues in agriculture? So food insecurities, as you can see, because there is overpopulation and in overproduction in short term, because we want to produce more and more food, because we have to meet the demands of food around the world, because the population is continuously rising. There is a demand of more food, and we are continuously facing the food insecurities for a long for a large population. And then there is a decline in yield, because a yield will be declined significantly with the time, because climates are changing, rain patterns are continuously changing, and just because of the rain patterns are continuously changing, so there will be decline in the yield. And then the diversification, crops and cropping system intersect in space, and then the last one is quality and quantity of water resources, because whatever freshwater resources in the form of glaciers we are having, they are just because of the global rise in the floods, and there are so many disasters in many areas, and in some areas there are there are floods. Okay, then sources of 30% of the total global anthropogenic emissions of greenhouse gas emission. So particulate matter in and the greenhouse gas emission from land clearance by the fire and burning of residues. So anthropogenic emissions of methane and nitrogen oxide. So if we talk about methane from rice stock production, and then the nitrogen oxide from the fertilizer and so what are the impacts of climate change on like every 1 degree Celsius increase in the temperature reduce wheat production by 4 to 5 million tons. So it's I'm not talking about the kgs, I'm talking about the million tons. And then there are reduced frequency of like frost damages, like less damage to peas, mustard, and then the increased in floods like to increase production variability, and then the cereal productivity to decrease by 10 to 40% by 21st century. So agriculture, we can see agriculture as a part of solution by increasing carbon sequestration through land management. And then there are rotations with cover crops like green manure, or we can see the agroforestry. And then there are the conservation tillage would reduce global greenhouse carbon dioxide gas emissions by 5 to 15%. If you remind the previous slide in which I have been showing you the percentage of global greenhouse gas emissions since 1990s to 2010, then I think you the green color is a very dominant color, is still in the mind of the participants, because that color was showing the carbon dioxide percentage. It's the measure of like greenhouse gas emission. Okay, so I have added these slides because I want to show participants the very context of Pakistan. Because Pakistan is like an agro economy, we are dependent on agriculture because we are agricultural country, and with about like half of its earning their livelihoods from this sector, because half of us are earning livelihood from this particular sector, agriculture I'm talking about. So I have to mention the scenarios and the challenges specifically related to climate change and agriculture. So this sector contributes about like 22% of the total GDP growth, domestic, the income of, the people of the population of Pakistan. And Pakistan earned a high percentage of its foreign exchange from agriculture alone, approximately 70%. So unless it maintains stable growth rate, its economy will suffer immensely. The fertile terrain of our country is the cradle of Pakistan's agriculture. It is presently threatened by the vagaries of climate change, largely introduced through a rise in global warming. I would like to mention the reference of WHO reports. We have a very finest quality of mangoes that we export overall around the globe, that is Chonsa mango. But they have declared that we will be losing 50% of its production by this year just because of the climate change. So it's huge. Like, people are depending upon for their livelihoods on agriculture, and agriculture is giving nothing back to them. So high concentration of carbon dioxide can have like beneficial impacts on the crops, like however, rising temperature and precipitation cause HOIC, like with the biological complexities, thus resulting a lesser yield per acre. So reduced water availability is like a main challenge to agriculture, and then there are a drastic reduction in cereal productions like wheat and rice, because they are the staple food of most of the population, as well as the cotton and cereal, predicted to decline by 15 to 20% by the regional climate model. We have been talking about the sustainable development goals, in which whole the world wants to achieve these goals by 2030, and there are so many countries who are not contributing in greenhouse gas emission, but the challenges of climate change are devastating. In the northern areas, minor improvements in yield due to increased duration of like growing period, livestock production predicted to by 25%, creating crisis in mills, meat and poultry, and pushing prices at very high level, like beyond the reach of a common man. And we are talking about like we want to end we want to end hunger, because we want zero hunger in SDG goal 2, and we want no poverty in SDG 1. But you can see the challenging here in many countries. So I'm living in Pakistan, so I have I'm in this scenario of climate on agriculture and the lives of people here in my country. Pakistan is already amongst the forest trees resources poor countries in the world, with the merged 5.2% of the forest cover as against 25% which is required. Instead of increased temperature would increase fertilizer requirement for the same production target and result on higher emissions. And these fertilizers we use, because I think 25% of the fertilizers that we put into the agricultural land are being used by the crops, and rest of this 75% act as the chelating agents. And with the rainfall, what happens, like they cause eutrophication in many aquatic ecosystems. So Pakistan is ranked 28th in the list of countries most affected by climate change variations. Climate variations give rise to new species of insects, worm, pests, and other related species. And then the rise in anonymously becomes hard for the farmers to utilize agricultural land to its full potential due to the unpredictable weather patterns, hence reduce the yield and loss of the production. As I have mentioned, the loss of production of mangoes just because of the climate change. So Pakistan is one of the fourth countries who they are facing climate changes. Pakistan is the fourth most water scarce country and are in this basin that is providing the water to majority of the country. It's the third water scarce basin, water stressed basins. So there are some required adaptation. Pakistan need to put it immediate adaptation measures directed as its agriculture sector will help stabilize its agricultural growth rate at around 5% above the population growth rate of 2.4%. And this needs investment in research and development that provides solutions to higher stresses agricultural, because we need some applied sciences here to if we want to get rid of like these challenges. And then high-tech meteorological services along with early warning systems to predict flood, drought, cyclones, and other climate disasters, and then the breeding of livestock species and multiplication of seeds variety that are resistant to drought and diseases and pests. So we have to work more on that and building up the food to cater for extreme events. Development of action plan that focuses on adaptation and mitigation measures to enable sustainable growth in agriculture, and the final resources to tune of USD 30 billion or more address the needs of agricultural alone over the next 10 years, how know-how, farmer and capacity building of like highly diversified ecological region, because our farmers are laymen, they know nothing about like hybrid seeds and different technologies that are being used in or that are being used around the globe just to increase the productivity and to tackle with these issues, but they are continuously using the conservative methods that they have been using since ages. So climate change, what I would like to share with all of you, like climate change is a reality, and Pakistani agriculture is likely to suffer losses due to heat, erratic weather, and decreased irrigation availability. Adaptation strategies can help minimize negative impacts. These need researches, funding, and policy support. Cost of like adaptation and mitigation are unknown, but likely to be high. Cost of like inaction could be even higher. So climate change is the beginning of the end, I think. And the earth is heating, so is the environment. Now it's up to us, like what we do. So my request to all the participants and all the research team and all the scientists that are sitting here, come forward, join hands, save agriculture to sustain our lives or ourselves. So it's me. I'm really thankful to all the participants just because of your patience, because internet was like disturbing me today and all of you. So you people are all amazing because you are there for me and waiting for the internet to be kind on me to share my views on climate action, sustainable development goals, specifically SDG 13 and its impact on climate. So it's about me. My name is Arooj Khan and I'm lecturer and a government consultant. So yes, I'm a social activist and one environmentalist, one of the environmentalists that want to do something, for my people, just to mitigate and to fight what climate changes are. So these are the required readings. So if there are any questions, so your questions are most welcome.
All right, thank you. And we appreciate you sharing so much about climate change and why we so desperately need more environmental solutions in this world. All right, so I guess my main question for you is, how can we help in terms of using synthetic biology and our biological tools that these researchers are developing? How can that help you with your goal of climate change?
So it's a very good question from your side, and most expected one as well. So to me, the only solution of these climate changes is we need to do some more research.
Oh dear.
Audible?
Hello. Are you able to speak?
Okay, if I'm audible, if some participant can just text me or raise hand if I'm audible.
You are audible.
Thank you. Thank you. So the question was about this, how synthetic biology can help us. I think synthetic biology, plant root system to develop emissions, and because synthetic biology can help in so many pathways. So like we can modify the plant quality by genetic engineering. So like so many pathways like to promote, like we can have like such which will enable crop plant to resist stresses, because I have mentioned that my province has been facing drought since last 15 years, and now suddenly there are flash floods. So what we can do, being biologist or being synthetic biologists, so we can utilize genetic engineering genetically engineered crops, or some specifically seed that are drought resistant, that are pest resistant and disease resistant.
All right, thank you. I'm sure that Katerina from iGEM Patras will have a lot to say about that too.
Actually, I was wondering to collect some samples from the flood affected areas, and the running crops, so I wanted to collect some samples from those areas, like what are the main composition of water right now after the flood, and then we can and its impact on the land, then we can like better help the plant roots.
Recording in progress.
And I would like to share the social media link with all of you. So if there are some other questions, so you can like contact me anytime. And if you have like solutions, then you are like most welcome, because we need some more solutions.
Do you work with any particular group that you can get students and researchers in contact with, so we can collaborate? Perhaps can also put that in the chat if you'd like.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Are there? Thank you very much. Are there any other questions for this speaker? And again, she's put her information, contact information in the chat. So if there are any other questions, you can always contact her there. And yeah, so we can see that biology and integral to the climate and to sustain life, we will need to look on a global scale. All right. If there are no other questions, would we like to move on to iGEM Patras?
Yeah, thank you, Carol, a lot. I would like to thank again Ms. Arooj about your speech. So we can move forward to iGEM Patras project. Leave me for a minute to let me actually share my screen. Okay. I hope you can see the PowerPoint here. Please confirm.
We can see it.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to begin with the iGEM Patras 2022 project. Hello everyone, I'm Katerina. I face some technical issues, so you won't be able to see me for today. And I'm going to describe to you iGEM Patras 2022 project. We represent the University of Patras from Western Greece. And our project is PAGEA, which stands for Precision Agriculture using Genomics, Artificial Intelligence, and Air Transportable Equipment. More specifically, the problem that we're trying to solve regards the soil and the sector of agriculture, which faces some very crucial problems, according to the implementation from experts that our team came in touch with, and more specifically about the collection of important data related to soil quality over large areas and the analysis of soil from hard-to-reach crops. Also, some other issues that our team addressed throughout their own research regard also the need to combine the existing precision agriculture and scientific technologies, as well as the difficulty of analyzing the data, and of course, some low efficacy problems that the crop inputs have, including the fertilizers and the pesticides and the irrigation of the water. In the field of agriculture, there is also a very important issue regarding the unnecessary use of pesticides and fertilizers, which are very oftenly observed, which of course leads to the lack of financial resources, as well as the pollution of the soil and of course the water. Therefore, our team decided to find biosustainable and effective way to deal with those problems. So we introduced our project PAGEA. So what is precision agriculture? Precision agriculture is a very important and very innovative way of improving the agricultural production. It is a very important management system of the land, according to which the levels of the inputs can be applied to the areas of the field, and depending on the production of the potential and soil climatic conditions. The aim is to increase production, improve quality, reduce the negative environmental impact, as well as preserve the natural resources. In recent years, the practice of precision agriculture has been enabled with GPS as well as drones, which our team decided to utilize for our project. These are very important tools that help the farmers to pinpoint their exact location in a field, as well as allow the mapping of spatial variability for as many variables as can be measured, such as crop yield, soil characteristics, topography, organic matter content, moisture levels, levels of pH, minerals, and of course other parameters that are very important for the crops. So with our project, we are trying to combine state-of-the-art precision agriculture tools such as the above mentioned remote sensing and drones, and we aspire to combine them with the data analysis and machine learning, as well as metagenomics. Metagenomics has been a very important and fundamental branch for the determination of soil microflora, as it is a branch of analysis for environmental samples, which are composed of a multitude of microorganisms. These sequences contained in these environmental samples allow us to accurately identify the microbiome and classify it through next generation sequencing, which is another very important tool that our team is using. Regarding the data analysis and machine learning, this information can be, the above mentioned, which is precision agriculture state-of-the-art techniques, as well as NZS, are very important information that can be combined with AI-based decision supporting tools, aiming to clearly visualize a set of characteristics for the crops, as well as to suggest personalized soil improvement interventions based on them. Therefore, our goal is to create an innovative protocol using machine learning, a model that is going to combine 3 different types of data, which are molecular characteristics, physicochemical characteristics, as well as agronomical. So our team decided to address this problem. As we said, we tried to get in touch with experts and farmers in the field of agriculture, and then decided to do a bibliographical research. Through this literature data, we concluded that there are insufficient information to combine the technology and tools of precision agriculture, machine learning, as well as next generation sequencing through the use of a portable sequencing device for the specific plant that we wanted to work here in Greece. More specifically, we would like to work with tomato plants. So these are some examples from our bibliographical research, as well as the gaps that we found. Regarding now the experiment, the course began with transplanting of tomato, and in particular a specific hybrid in an experimental field area, which was also impregnated with the Bacillus subtilis strains. These bacteria were specifically used because we saw that our plant growth promoting bacteria, and more specifically, their role is to work as biostimulants for the soil to help promote growth, also the yield and the quality of the crops. Such effects of bacteria have been shown through our research to increase the yield of sweet corn in Greece when they're used in the soil before the cultivation. Therefore, we decided to turn to this solution. So then we have our soil sampling process, which was carried out according to a specific protocol with parallel recording of the depth, the soil quality, the plant and fruit quality, and other characteristics, weather conditions, time and day of collection. The data collection in this way and the process can be automated using specially designed custom-made and soil sampling drones, which is one of the goals of our project, to create actually a possibility for farmers to work in very large area and make it more easy for someone to be able to collect those data. So in this process of data analysis, more specifically, we collect the data, as we said, from the soil. This is going to happen through NZS devices that are going to determine the bacterial species contained in the collected soil. This is a method that ensures high data generation speed, real-time sequencing, of course, high throughput and low cost. These metagenomic data are going to be combined, as we said, with agronomical as well as physicochemical about the soil of a specific cultivation. And this is going to happen through a machine learning model, which is an algorithm that is trained to combine this data and exclude some predictions about the specific soil which we are studying. So the goals of our project is to improve the soil and increase the crop yield, as well as to make accessible agricultural data, even in very, very large areas. Also, through our AI tool, the algorithm, we want to predict soil biodiversity and crops suitable for planting, as well as make solutions that are going to ensure profitability and sustainability. We also would like to promote environmental protection, and this is going to happen through specific measures that are going to be suggested by the AI system, so that fertilizers and pesticides are used as in the least actually possible way, or for the farmers to use alternates of this. And this is going to ensure protection both of the soil microflora as well as the water from infections and the carriage that is caused by fertilizers and pesticides. Also, we would like in this way to help to the conservation of natural resources and of course the protection of biodiversity. Thanks a lot for your attention. You can ask anything you want. And of course, I would like to say here that if there are teams watching right now that are in this track and they study about agricultural projects, you can ask anything, we can collaborate however you wish. And thank you again.
Okay, wonderful, Carolina. Audrey, are the next speaker ready, or are we going to have a quick break? Oh, also, Carolina, did you say you had a little form to share?
Yeah, I'm going to send it right now to the chat. Thanks a lot, Carol. Regarding the competition as well as the project, we would really like for everyone in the general public to share your opinion about precision agriculture and the Pangea project now that it has been presented to you. So I'm going to share in the chat right now this Google form. Thanks a lot, Carol, and everyone.
Okay, thank you, Carolina. Thank you again. So right now we are currently scheduled, I believe, to have Itzani de la Cruz Salazar speak. But are we on time for that, or is it?
Yes,
yes.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Janet de la Cruz.
Okay, yeah, well, for introducing our next speaker is Itzani de la Cruz. Itzani de la Cruz Salazar is an industrial chemical engineer graduated from the higher school. Sorry about that. Okay, I start again. Itzani de la Cruz Salazar is an industrial chemical engineer graduated from the Higher School in Chemical Engineering and Extractive Industries of the National Polytechnic Institute, IPN. For some years, she worked in the field of instrumentation and control in sugar mills. She is currently a student of the Master of Science in Chemical Engineering at IPN, where she collaborates with a team of researchers and students on advanced oxidation processes and biological systems. So, Itzani, do you want to present, or I put your presentation?
Yeah, I can present it.
Okay.
Let me share my screen.
Right. All right. Thank you. You should be able to share your screen.
Yeah, could you confirm if you see my screen, please?
Yeah, could you confirm if you see my screen?
It is there.
Yeah. Hola a todos. Yo les voy a hablar sobre mi proyecto que lleva por título Evaluación catalítica del óxido de manganeso para la degradación del bisfenol A mediante ozono.
Ok, un momento, por favor, Janet. Vamos a
Ok.
traducir. Conforme lo vayas diciendo, lo vamos a ir traduciendo. Entonces, si me das un momento para traducir y todo perfecto, ¿ok?
Vale, gracias.
We're going to be translating the presentation right now, so just give us a moment with all that. Cuando quieras, Janet.
Ok. Bueno, yo les voy a hablar un poco sobre mi proyecto de tesis que lleva por título Evaluación catalítica del óxido de manganeso para la degradación del bisfenol A mediante ozono.
So I'll begin to talk about my project of catalytical, I couldn't read the title.
Yeah.
Catalytical evaluation of manganese oxide for the degradation of bisphenol A with ozone.
Well, en la actualidad, uno de los principales problemas ambientales a nivel global es la escasez de fuentes de agua con una calidad adecuada para el consumo humano. A este problema se le suma el incremento continuo en la demanda de agua potable, como consecuencia del crecimiento acelerado de la población, pues en este sentido la preservación y el uso de agua es un problema fundamental para la sociedad actual, ya que los efectos nocivos que causa la contaminación del agua en la población y los ecosistemas, pues destacan algunos como estos.
Globally, we face a big problem regarding clean water and giving this clean water to different people and getting to the right places. Adelante. Un poquito más despacio entre cada punto para que lo pueda traducir más correctamente, ¿sí? Gracias.
Algunos de los efectos nocivos que causa la contaminación del agua en la población, pues es la afectación a la salud humana como intoxicaciones.
One of the consequences we can find of these compounds in humans is intoxication that can impact the human health.
Enfermedades infecciosas e incluso la muerte.
There can also be infectious diseases and even lead to death.
Daños a la flora y a la fauna, provocando malformaciones en animales e incluso algunos bebés.
There can even be damages to nature and even affectations to babies.
Y alteraciones de ecosistemas.
And ecosystems, alteration of ecosystems.
Entre los principales contaminantes presentes en nuestro entorno, de acuerdo a la Agencia de Protección Ambiental, se encuentran los disruptores endocrinos.
According to the National Agency of Ambiental Protection, one of the main compounds we can find are endocrine disruptors.
Estos contaminantes son sustancias químicas volátiles capaces de alterar el correcto funcionamiento corporal y de ciertas hormonas en los cuerpos humanos.
These are volatile compounds that can affect certain interactions in the human body, as well as some interactions with cells.
Entre los disruptores endocrinos mayoritariamente usados se encuentra el bisfenol A.
One of the main endocrine disruptors we can find is bisphenol A.
Se ha utilizado para fabricar ciertos plásticos y resinas epoxis.
It is used to produce certain plastics and epoxide resins.
Empleados principalmente en recipientes que almacenan líquidos, alimentos o para recubrir el interior de productos metálicos.
Principally used as for bottling, as bottle sources, or even used as cans.
Debido a los efectos adversos sobre la salud de humanos y los animales relacionados con el bisfenol A, es importante su eliminación, principalmente en fuentes de agua.
Because of the effects they can have on animals and humans, it is important to degrade these compounds from the water.
Por lo que deben encontrarse métodos o tecnologías que reduzcan los problemas de contaminación de aguas.
That's why it's necessary to find methods or technologies to reduce these compounds in waters.
Dentro de las tecnologías de remediación, de acuerdo al tipo de tratamiento, se encuentran los biológicos, que usan la actividad metabólica natural de ciertos microorganismos para degradar o remover los contaminantes.
Between some of the methods we can find for degrading these compounds, we have biological processes, which use the normal activity of certain biological compounds and certain creatures to bioremediate the waters.
Y también se encuentran los procesos físico-químicos que ejercen separación o destrucción de ciertas sustancias aprovechando sus propiedades físicas y químicas.
We also have physical chemical processes that allow us throughout different movements or physical activities to degrade or to separate these compounds.
Sin embargo, en algunos casos, estas técnicas resultan ser inadecuadas debido a que no se logra la eliminación completa del contaminante o en algunos casos requieren de tiempos largos de tratamiento.
These processes can be inconvenient because they don't degrade completely these compounds or they require a lot of time to do this complete job.
En respuesta a estas situaciones, pues se han desarrollado otras tecnologías como los procesos de oxidación avanzada.
With these, other technologies have been developed as advanced oxidation processes.
Que son aplicados cuando se encuentran contaminantes tóxicos no biodegradables.
They can be applicated when there is compounds that cannot be biodegraded.
Este tipo de procesos, pues se requiere un conjunto de tratamientos que se pueden usar para remediar estos efluentes tóxicos mediante la formación de radicales hidroxilo.
Throughout the formation of hydroxyl radicals, the cleansing of these water bodies can be done.
El radical hidroxilo presenta un potencial de oxidación alto en comparación de otros, como el cloro o incluso el ozono.
Hydroxyl radicals have high oxidizing potentials, even higher than chlorine or others.
Y la principal ventaja de este radical hidroxilo es que no es selectivo, por lo que una vez que se genera, pues reacciona con los compuestos presentes en el sistema.
Another advantage of this agent is that it's not selective, so it can act with other compounds present in the water.
Los procesos de oxidación avanzada se diferencian entre ellos por la manera en que son producidos estos radicales hidroxilo.
The processes of advanced oxidation are separated between how these agents react.
Y se pueden dividir entre procesos homogéneos y heterogéneos.
This can be separated between homogeneous or heterogeneous processes.
Dentro de la categoría de los heterogéneos encontramos a la ozonación catalítica.
And the heterogeneous processes, we can find catalytic ozonation.
Y este tipo de tratamientos pues es una técnica novedosa debido a que elimina compuestos recalcitrantes del agua.
This is a new technique that can eliminate certain calcined compounds from the water.
Tales como ácidos carboxílicos, cetonas, aldehídos, entre otros compuestos que son obtenidos a partir de un proceso convencional o una ozonación convencional.
And they can degrade carboxylic acids, acetones, and other compounds that are generated for these conservation processes.
Okay. Bajo este contexto, la ozonación catalítica tiene como objetivo la eliminación del compuesto recalcitrante y además se busca reducir los tiempos de tratamiento.
With this, this process can allow for reduced times of activity and also for the degradation of. ¿Podrías repetir la primera parte que mencionaste?
Que tiene como objetivo la eliminación de compuestos recalcitrantes.
Okay. Recalcificated compounds can also be degraded throughout this process and also reduce times. Gracias.
Okay. Dentro de los catalizadores más empleados se encuentra el óxido de manganeso, puesto que son baratos y no tóxicos.
Between the most used catalytics, we can find manganese oxide because it's one of the most efficient ones and also one of the cheapest ones.
Además que contienen oxígenos en sus estructuras químicas y beneficia la formación de estos radicales hidroxilo.
And also because it has oxygen between its compounds and it helps or allows the formation of these hydroxyl compounds.
Ahora les voy a platicar un poco sobre mi metodología experimental, que principalmente se basa en 3 etapas.
Now we're going to go around the experimental methodology that she applied that separates on 3 stages.
La primera etapa se habla sobre la síntesis del material, en donde se prepara una solución precursora.
The first stage is around the synthesis of the material where we prepare a initial solution.
Después se lleva una agitación durante 30 minutos y se vierten en reactores para realizar una síntesis hidrotermal durante 12 horas.
Then it's agitated for 30 minutes to later be added to a reactor for being heated for 2 hours, sorry.
12 hours. Posteriormente se filtra la solución y se hacen lavados con etanol y agua para retirar impurezas y finalmente se lleva un secado a 60 grados por 24 horas.
Then this solution is filtered with ethanol and water to later on be dried for 24 hours.
Posteriormente se realiza una caracterización de este material para después ser evaluado mediante una ozonación convencional, que es prácticamente usar ozono, y se hace una sinergia utilizando ozono y el catalizador.
Then the substance is characterized throughout an ozonation where we can use practically ozone and afterwards aquí, ¿puedes repetir esa última parte, perdón?
Se hace una sinergia de ozono más catalizador.
And then a synergy between the ozone and the catalyst is made.
El sistema con el que contamos en el laboratorio es generar ozono a partir de oxígeno extraseco.
The way of generating ozone is throughout dry oxygen.
Y este flujo de oxígeno se hace pasar a un generador de ozono que genera el ozono mediante descargas eléctricas.
Then this ozone is taken to an ozone generator through electrical charges.
Y este flujo de oxígeno ozono es pasado por la parte inferior del reactor.
Then this oxygen and ozone flow is taken to the inside of a reactor.
Que está en contacto continuo con 300 mililitros de una solución de bisfenol A a 50 ppm. Y posteriormente lo que se recolecta de datos es la concentración de ozono a la salida del reactor.
Afterwards, this solution is taken to this reactor, the ozone and the remaining oxygen, and it's in interaction with the BPA solution at 50 particles, well, 50 ppm. And afterwards, this solution is analyzed.
Ahora les muestro algunos resultados de caracterización del material obtenido, que es la estructura alfa del óxido de manganeso.
Now here we can see the results of our characterization, or we can see structures of the alpha oxide manganese.
Okay, estos son patrones de difracción de rayos X, la cual podemos observar estos planos cristalinos, los cuales nos indican que pues verdaderamente logramos obtener esta fase cristalina de acuerdo a patrones que ya se encuentran previamente cargados en software.
Here we can see that the manganese oxide does create crystal structures that, well, they're related to already seen in softwares. And here we have the X-ray spectrometry, I believe.
Ahora bien les muestro un espectrómetro de infrarrojo, en donde podemos observar que entre 500 y 600 nanómetros tenemos un pico característico de enlaces de oxígeno, manganeso, oxígeno.
In this infrared spectrometer, we can see around 500 and 600 that we have relations or compounds between manganese and oxygen.
Y a 872, 825 podemos encontrar este pico característico que está asignado a la relación de manganeso y radicales hidroxilo, e incluso únicamente el radical hidroxilo.
And around 825 and then 872, we can also find relations with the compounds of manganese and hydroxyl compounds, or even only hydroxyl compounds.
Ahora, en cuanto a resultados de eliminación del BPA, ahora podemos ver ambos perfiles de eliminación del bisfenol. El perfil de línea azul se refiere al tratamiento de ozono puro y el morado se refiere al tratamiento de ozono más catalizador.
Now here we can see the results of the BPA elimination. The two lines, the purple one or blue belongs to the ozone, only ozone. And the second one, the pink one, is related to the ozone and also with the alpha manganese oxide.
Y se puede apreciar que cuando utilizamos un catalizador reducimos el tiempo de tratamiento a 40 minutos, mientras que para un tratamiento de ozono se necesitan de 120 minutos.
Now here we can observe that using a catalyst, we can reduce the time of this degradation time to 40 minutes when it's combined with the catalyst. And when it's by itself, the ozone, we have a total time of 120 minutes.
En cuanto a algunos subproductos que se lograron identificar en la descomposición del bisfenol A, tenemos al ácido oxálico, que podemos observar que para tratamiento de ozono convencional tenemos un perfil de acumulación, ya que después de 120 minutos no logramos la degradación de este contaminante.
So here we can see some of the byproducts of this degradation. The first one we have is when the pure ozone is that there's no degradation of it after the 120 minutes when it's by itself.
Sin embargo, cuando se tiene un tratamiento catalítico, tenemos un perfil al parecer con tendencia a eliminación, lo que nos indica que estamos de alguna manera removiendo este compuesto recalcitrante.
When this ozone is combined with the catalyst, we can see that there's somewhat of a profile of that there's a degradation in this activity. Also, it's important to mention that this is oxalic acid, one of the byproducts.
Por otro lado, otro subproducto de degradación del bisfenol se encuentra el fenol. Este compuesto se encuentra en mayor concentración para un tratamiento con ozono y se requieren de 90 minutos para la eliminación completa.
Other byproducts we can find is phenol, that for a complete degradation, it takes a total of 90 minutes when it's by itself with the ozone.
Mientras que para el tratamiento catalítico, podemos observar que la concentración es mucho menor a la del tratamiento convencional y únicamente se requieren de 30 minutos de tratamiento para su eliminación.
Now, when the phenol is combined with the ozone and the catalytic compound, we can see that the concentrations are also lower and it takes less time to complete this degradation.
Okay. Del lado derecho tenemos al ácido maleico. Igual presentan perfiles para ambos tratamientos de formación y degradación en los primeros 10 minutos. Sin embargo, podemos observar menor concentraciones en tratamientos convencionales que el catalítico.
Now, in the graph on the right, we can have the oxalic acid degradation. We can see that the one combined with the catalyst has also less concentrations, and it has a higher profile, and it takes less time to complete this degradation.
Ok, ahora les voy a mostrar resultados de carbono orgánico total.
Now we're going to see the total carbon. Perdón, ¿puedes repetir el último?
Sí, carbono orgánico total.
Okay, thank you. Ahora podemos, sorry, now we can see the organic carbon removal in total.
Ajá. Y podemos observar que la ozonación convencional apenas se logra remover un 26% de la materia orgánica inicial, mientras que para el tratamiento catalítico podemos observar una remoción de casi un 40% de la materia orgánica.
With conventional methods, we can only have a 26% of the degradation of these materials. And on the other hand, with the catalyst, we can have a in total of even a 40% degradation of these compounds.
También se realizaron ensayos de toxicidad de los efluentes ozonados a diferentes tiempos de tratamiento.
There was also toxicity bioassays related to the effluents of these compounds in the water.
En donde podemos ver que para un tratamiento convencional sí se logra un mayor crecimiento del hipocotilo cuando se aumenta el tiempo de tratamiento.
With conventional methods, when the treatment time is increased, we can find high concentrations of hypocotyl on the assay.
Sin embargo, si comparamos los tiempos finales de tratamiento, podemos observar que mejora un crecimiento para el tratamiento catalítico.
But on the other hand, in the catalyst treatment, we can see an increase of these sprout growths in relation to the same catalyst.
Se hizo un mismo estudio, pero ahora en la raíz de la planta de lechuga, y se observa que se requieren tiempos mayores, en este caso 120 minutos, para mejorar el crecimiento de esta.
And also done in the same species of lettuce, we can find that in roots, it takes more time with conventional methods to obtain these higher results, around 120 minutes.
Y estas pues son algunas imágenes de las lechuguitas, de cómo fueron creciendo. Incluso presentan algunas malformaciones en esta parte de la raíz.
¿Cuál fue la última palabra? ¿Microperforaciones o proliferación?
Malformaciones.
Gracias. Now, here we have the images of the effects on growing lettuces. Here we can see on the bottom of the leaf, on the bottom of the roots, some malformations based on this BPA solution.
Okay. Y bueno, finalmente las conclusiones. Ambos tratamientos pues logran la degradación completa del BPA. Sin embargo, para el tratamiento convencional se requieren de 120 minutos.
Both conventional ozonation and catalytic ozonation degraded BPA. In the case of conventional ozonation, it took 120 minutes of treatment. And for the other one, it was a lower time of 40 minutes to complete the removal of the pollutant.
En cuanto a los subproductos de degradación, se encuentran en menor concentración para los tratamientos catalíticos y también pues se reduce el tiempo para eliminación de estos.
The related es lo que está ahí en la presentación, ¿no?
Sí.
Okay. The profiles of the byproducts generated in water during the degradation of BPA show a behavior of generation and elimination during 60 minutes of treatment by conventional ozonation, indicating that not only ozone is capable of degrading the main compound, but also the byproducts generated.
Y finalmente, los efluentes tratados mediante catalizador pues resultan ser no tóxicos porque observamos un crecimiento en el ensayo de las lechugas.
And also with the effluents treated by the catalyst, we can also see that they're not toxic because there was also an increase on the growth of these lettuces related to the test.
Y eso es todo y muchas gracias por su paciencia y atención.
This will be all, and thank you very much for your patience and your time. If you have any questions, we can also go throughout the route of translating them. And so go ahead.
All right, thank you for giving us such an informative talk. Are there any questions from the audience?
Any questions or? Oh, okay, well, we're going to continue with the program. Thank you very much, Janet. Muchas gracias, Janet, por habernos dado esta plática y continuaremos con el programa. Muchas gracias.
Gracias. Okay. Now, I believe our next speaker is Rafael Garcia Gomez. If Audrey, you would like to introduce him.
Okay, we are still waiting a few minutes for our speakers. So I don't know if we can wait 5 more minutes only, please.
Martin Esteban Gonzalez Lopez. Okay.
Yeah. So maybe a 5 minutes break, please.
Okay. If you want to stretch your legs, get some water, it's a good time.
Okay, the doctor told us that it recently have an earthquake in. So here is hey Martin, thanks for joining us. So if let me turn off my camera. Okay. So yeah, thanks, Carol. So now we can continue with our agenda. Now we will have the PhD Martin Esteban González López. Martin Esteban González López is BSc in Chemical Engineering, MSc in Forestal Products, and PhD in Chemical Engineering from Universidad de Guadalajara. He is currently a postdoctoral researcher at Tecnológico de Monterrey in Bioengineering Department. Dr. Martin González has published 22 articles in prestigious international journals, being the first author or corresponding author in more than half of them. His line of research involved the sustainable use of ligocellulosic waste for the production of biodegradable materials with high mechanical performance and environmental remediation applications in the field of water treatment. He has carried out research stays at institutions such as Université Laval in Quebec, Canada, and the Institute of Polymer Science and Technology in Madrid, Spain. His work has recognized with the State Prize for Innovation, Science, and Technology, Jalisco in 2019 for this master thesis on fiber polymer compatibility strategies, while his doctoral thesis was awarded the State Prize in 2021 with the project of production and modification of biopolymers for the application as adsorbents in continuous systems, as well as the mathematical modeling of safe processes. Recently, he received the appointment as a level 1 researcher of the National System of Researchers by the National Council of Science and Technology in Mexico. So welcome and thanks to be here, Martin. Do you want to present or we share your presentation?
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm sorry, I had a small trouble with my earphones and I wasn't listening to anything up to the middle of the presentation. But now it's fixed and I'm ready to continue. So I think I want to present myself. Is that okay?
That is perfectly okay. You should have screen sharing abilities.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Okay, so I will start now to share my screen. Let me just, okay, give me 1 minute. I'll put full screen on this. For me, if you can see now my presentation, please.
It is there.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so, well, again, sorry about the delay. When I was entering to the office, I think we had another earthquake here in Mexico today because the alarm went on in another building. So they weren't letting me, get into my office. So that's the reason I was late at the beginning. And, with the trouble with the earphones, another couple of minutes of delay. So first of all, I really want to thank for the opportunity or for the invitation of presenting some of my insights into how can we mitigate the environmental impact of plastic pollution. So I'm very happy to be here at this meetup and be presenting you my ideas on these topics. So let's say the outline for this presentation, when I was thinking about what I wanted to share with you today, was about something that's a very popular topic these days, that it's the concept of microplastics. So this concept is something that I'm really starting to work on. However, I do not have yet results that I can share with you. So I, make a little bit of changes into my presentation to just show you the general picture of how plastic pollution is generating those kind of problems. So yeah, the title for this presentation is Efforts to Mitigate the Environmental Impact of Plastic Pollution. And we will try to approach biopolymers or analyze how biopolymers can be a possible solution for that. If at some point you have any questions, you can of course write them directly into the chat, but it could be another option to just write them down, and at the end of the presentation, we can have a session for that. Okay. So as they introduced me, my name is Martin. I'm a PhD in chemical engineering. I will present myself in a minute. But now, currently, I'm a postdoc here at TEC de Monterrey. And again, I appreciate the invitation that I got to be here with you. So yeah, this is who am I? So I'm 29 years old. I'm a chemical engineer from the University of Guadalajara here in Mexico, as I said. My master is a master in forest product science, and my PhD was again in chemical engineering. I guess I, just like to get back into the suffering a little bit of math and analyzing some transfer phenomena as well. So my expertise, or the things that I've been working on so far, it's in general polymer processing. I worked a lot in the development of biocomposites, but also something also related to water treatment. And now the postdoc I'm carrying is in the Sustainability and Climate Change Lab. So I'm also working a little bit on that as well. So the summary of this presentation will be telling you a little bit of my research experience. So the first thing I worked on was a little bit about developing linear medium density polyethylene and agave composites. I'm going to show you a little bit of that in a minute. And also the development of compatibilizers for biocomposites. We analyzed a little bit about how can we assure the biodegradation or analyze the accelerated weathering of those polymers. I worked a little bit also into developing sorbents. We will discuss a little bit about this adsorption as a separation process for removing heavy metals or dyes from polluted water. And at the end, I would like to conclude with the perspective or the opportunity areas or areas for research that we can have for the future related to microplastics or microbioplastics. This is actually what I want to discuss as the key point at the end of the presentation. So I will start talking a little bit about agave and tequila. As you know, tequila is one of the main products that we have here in Jalisco, in the state of Jalisco. However, 40% of the consumed agave, which is the plant from which we extract tequila, is converted into residual bagasse. Okay, so the bagasse is just these fibers that at the beginning they are kind of, let's say, full of other components of carbohydrates, of residual sugars and other stuff that's currently not used for any added value products. So that 40% is actually a high percentage. It means that if we have over 1 million of agave tons per year for the production of tequila, we can get up to maybe 500,000 agave bagasse tons per year. So that's a lot of residue that we are obtaining from this process that we gotta generate an added value application for it. So what we do at that point is try to find out a sustainable management strategy to figure out what can we do for these fibers. So normally, as I said, the end of life, that's what EOL means. The end of life scenario for those fibers, for agave fibers, is just, let's say, burn it into waste power station. So we can only generate electric energy from that. So at this point, what we're doing right now is that we try to blend these fibers with the polymers and develop something that's called plastic fiber composite. This is actually a link that you can follow if at the end I can share with you the presentation. That's about McLaren. You know, maybe you can know McLaren for the development of very cool cars. It's working to develop biocomposites using a natural fiber composite to generate the racing seat, for instance. And the picture that we have here is actually one example of an added value product that you can generate by blending these fibers with some plastics. Let me just show you the next slide. This is in general what we can see in the microscopy or the morphology that we can follow by same observations of these plastic fiber composites. So in general, you can see that the matrix is composed by a polymer, and then we can have immersed in this matrix some fibers. So in this case, these fibers were obtained from the residual agave agaves. Of course, in that case, we need to introduce also some energy, some reagents, some chemicals to be able to remove all the other components from these fibers, the residual sugars, the carbohydrates, and all of that, in order to be able to blend it with the polymer. However, there's also a big challenge that's related to the compatibility that we have between fibers and the matrix. It's like blending water with oil. Let's say that water are the fibers and oil is the polymer. I think it's very logical that the oil is the polymer. These are oil derived plastics, such as polyethylene, polypropylene, all of them are produced by oil. But in general, we can say that natural fibers are highly hydrophilic. They're very prone to absorb water, and that's what makes them, to behave as water in this case, or in this analogy. So to make them compatible is not as easy as one may think. And what we observe in general is that we can find interfacial gaps. So this, let's say, black ring that we observe at this point are failure points. So if I have let's say, a material like the one that we have or the one that we saw here, that in the microscopic scale is having these gaps, this will result in very low or very poor mechanical performance. And that, of course, is related to the final application of those products. So what we will try to generate, or what we tried to generate back then, I think I did this project back in 2015, that's quite a long time ago, is to use compatibilizers to blend this together. So this will act as a bridge. Okay, this will act as a bridge between fibers and the matrix composed by the polymer. So the idea is that this right here that has an M and another N is just the chain of the polymer, or the polyethylene polymer. This is called malleated polyethylene. So maleic anhydride is a very interesting molecule that's, let's say, prone to react and interact chemically, forming some bonds with the fibers. And then I can have a strong chemical connection, right, or bonding between fibers and the matrix. So that was the idea. So what we did at the beginning was to develop agave fiber composites. So those agave fiber composites at the beginning were done with polyethylene. We were still talking about some polymer that's generating some environmental impact, but was our first approach to try to lower or diminish the amount of polymer that we were using. So you can see in this graph that if I incorporate, so UF means untreated fiber. I will discuss what treated fiber is in a minute. But if you can see, compared to polyethylene, I can add 10% of fiber. This is weight percent. And I can get nearly the same mechanical performance that I can observe for polyethylene. So that means that I can reduce the use of polymer by 10%. However, if I start to increase that up to 20, 30, 40%, I get to very low values of mechanical strength. So that means, of course, they will not replace the use of raw polymer, right? So what we try to do with the surface treatment of the fibers, which is what you can find here in this slide, is that we try to generate a coating of this compatibilizer into the fiber. So we can change from having this interfacial gap, this black ring around the fiber, to get a complete interaction between it. And I think this micrograph is quite beautiful because of that, because you can see how the fiber is completely blended with the polymer. So that when it receives some stress or deformation during an application, the fiber is also contributing to resist some of that effort. So what we did at the beginning, or at the beginning of this research line, was try to increase the amount of fiber that I can incorporate to the material up to 20% or beyond, right? Again, up to 20 and 40% was very difficult with this matrix, but I can at least add 20% of fiber, which at the beginning was a waste, to replace 20% of raw polymer. So that was the first approach we carried out to replace the use of, let's say, oil-derived plastics, right, that are generating the problems that we know. But I like to see my research not by saying that I'm, the best researcher and that I don't have any areas of opportunity. I actually like to criticize my own work. So one of the things that I'm analyzing right now of what I've learned, as I said, I did this project back in 2015 or 2016. That's 6 years ago, a long time ago. So now I know a lot of more things. So I have a broader picture of the plastic pollution problem. So the questions that I can ask, to the marketing of 2015 is the energy input that you're generating to produce these natural fiber composites. They do not generate a more, or let's say, a larger carbon footprint that just, disposing the agave fibers just to burn it or use it in landfill or something like that, right? So is it happening because of that? Well, there's of course a tool that we can use to analyze that. That's called life cycle assessment. So through life cycle assessment, I can, contemplate or analyze also the energy inputs or the generation of emissions of gases or chemicals that are maybe generating a more or a stronger environmental impact. Another thing is how green is the chemistry that was involved in the processing. So as I said, we carried out some coating of these fibers, and in that case, the cost was that we needed to use some solvents. In that case, I think we used toluene or benzene. I don't remember exactly what we used at the moment, but that of course is not a green solvent, right? So that's also generating some trouble. Well, one strategy that we used, I'm gonna talk to you a little bit about in a minute, was to recover the solvent and reuse it so that we don't need to use, fresh solvent every time we're carrying out this process. But the more important question, or the most important question was, can I call this material at least partially biodegradable? Because of course, as you can notice, natural fibers are biodegradable. They can be left in landfill, and after some time, they will completely turn themselves into CO2, maybe some carbohydrates and water and stuff like that. So the part that I'm using, that in this case was up to 20%, it's biodegradable. But if I look at my material as a whole material, not only that part, I can actually do not call my material not even partially biodegradable. And that's actually generating, as we will discuss at the end of the presentation, another problem that's related to the fragmentation or the incomplete degradation of these polymers. So the answer is no, okay, in this case. So what we did then, that's when I entered into my master's, was starting to, back in 2017, starting to analyze maybe now the use of biopolymers to develop biocomposites. So now instead of having just a regular composite of polyethylene, we are now having a biocomposite made also with a matrix of a biodegradable polymer. So the definition of a biopolymer is quite, it's not as clear as the scientists we will want to. There's a lot of greenwashing in this topic. So let's just analyze this and let's just be clear of what a biopolymer is. So if we look at this diagram, we can see that we have 4 quadrants. So we have at the right, biodegradable polymers, and on the top, we have bio-based polymers. So it means the easiest thing that we can observe is that we have fossil-based polymers, which are non-biodegradable. So those are conventional plastics. It's my polypropylene bottle, my polyethylene bag, all the plastics that we know, the PET bottle for beverages and stuff are located here. As you know, they generate that problem of plastic pollution that we saw at the beginning. That plastic is not being recycled, it's not being collected, and it's ending up in the environment, generating a lot of impact. But we have bio-based polymers. And one of the first things that happen is that we are able to generate polyethylene or PET, for instance, using biosources. We can use crops, we can generate bioethanol or ethylene glycol, and then generate a polymerization reaction to generate these polymers. But now they're not obtained for oil or for petroleum. They're obtained directly from a biosource. However, that does not make these polymers biodegradable to any extent. There's also another quadrant right here at the bottom right. That's biodegradable polymers that are fossil-based. And there are just a couple of cases of that. The most famous one is PCl, polycaprolactone. So that's a polymer that's obtained for petroleum, but due to their chemical characteristics that it has, it can be biodegradable in some cases. Of course, as you may notice, the quadrant that we will want to be nowadays is the biodegradable and bio-based quadrant of biopolymers. So some examples that we have there are PLA. PLA is the polymer of the 21st century. We have hydroxyalkanoates, PHP, PHBB, PBS, blends of starch and other stuff like that. So PHAs are obtained for microbial fermentations. So that's completely a bio-based and biodegradable polymer. So the idea that we have at the moment was, can we produce the same biocomposites that we did here, but now using a matrix as a biopolymer to generate something that's in theory 100% biodegradable? Well, the answer back in 2015 wasn't so clear, because again, it was not easy to develop the technology that we needed at the moment to blend these polymers with the fibers together. And the main problem is right here on the presentation. There were no available or commercially available compatibilizers. The compatibilizer that I used in 2015 in my bachelor's thesis, MAPE, M-A-P-E, it's commercial. You can buy that. You can buy this in Sigma or in AZDEQ or somewhere, right? However, if I will try to develop a compatibilizer based on PLA, for instance, it was not available in a commercial scale. So the challenge that we had at the moment was to develop some compatibilizers for these biocomposites. So that was the challenge that we solved in 2017 during my master's. And that's the reason I received the State Prize for Innovation, Science, and Technology. So these compatibilizers are similar. We are also using maleic anhydride as well, but also another molecule, that's the one right here, that's called glycidyl methacrylate. Okay, so the idea was to blend these molecules into a chain of PLA, right, of polylactic acid. So that synthesis is not so easy because we are trying to modify a polymer. So we have learned so far that polymers are quite, let's say, unreactive, right? It's very difficult to make them react with something. That's why they're such great articles, you know, to contain water, to contain food, because they're inert in some ways, right? So to modify a polymer, we needed to carry out a strategy that's called reactive extrusion. So that process, again, it was not easy, but in the presence of temperature and using DCP, that's called dicumyl peroxide, we were able to generate some free radicals in the structure of the polymer. And in that case, it was able to carry out a grafting reaction. That's why we see the G right here, right? It's a maleic anhydride grafted to a PLA chain. So we did that with some conditions that wasn't you know, so easy at the beginning to figure out, and also a temperature profile, because this needs to happen in the melt state of the polymer, right? That's why it's called reactive extrusion. So at the end, we can end up, you know, optimizing the conditions to a grafting degree of 1.9. We actually carried out a review at the moment, and this was, you know, back in 2017, quite an excellent result in terms of grafting degree. So we characterize that. I'm going to go full into the, well, this is in Spanish, it should be NMR, nuclear magnetic resonance. But we carry out a strong chemical procedure to figure out if we really were observing the product that we wanted. So this was the reaction that we have hypothesized at the moment, and it was just grafting the maleic anhydride molecule into PLA. So we observed the changes in some chemical groups, but yeah, as you may notice, we have a very low grafting degree. So of course, the signals that we observed in the nuclear magnetic resonance spectrum were very low, right? And also we have some convoluted peaks, right? Because we have different carbons. We have a lot of carbons in this structure. So what we can see is that carbons are going to change if we have some part of the chain is too long, right? So it means that the most abundant carbon that I have here, the tertiary carbon, you know, that's adjacent to the carbonyl. Of course, the most abundant one is the one that doesn't have the graft. And then I have another group that has the graft on it. And then I have another one that maybe something else is happening that we're not controlling in the reaction. So this approach was a very interesting one to analyze or to confirm that we have a strong compatibilizer to use with PLA. We proceeded with the same surface treatment or a similar one. It was to dissolve the compatibilizer into a solution. In this case, we used dimethyl formamide, I think. So instead of having a smooth surface of the fiber, after that process, now we have a thin layer of polymer that's coating the fiber, right? So hypothetically, this will behave very good when I produce biocomposites. And actually it did, right? We observed that we were able to also add up to 20 or 30% of fibers into PLA, having a very good mechanical performance. And as I said, one strategy that we used back then was to recover DMF, the solvent that we were using in this process, by this rotatory evaporation, right? This rotap, yeah. So what we do is that, of course, at a very low temperature to avoid degradation of the solvent with a very high vacuum, actually, we started to distillate the solvent or the solvent, and it was quite easy to recover nearly 75% of the solvent. If we tried to use or to recover more solvent, it was possible actually, but then it was very difficult to remove, the plastic. It was kind of a rubbery plastic that we obtained at the beginning in this flask. So that was quite complex, so we stopped right at 75%. So the comparison between these two compatibilizers is quite observable. We can see that the coating that we have with GMA instead of maleic anhydride is quite better. It's more homogeneous at the surface of the fibers, right? So that at the end ends up having a stronger performance. So we have these graphs here to just compare the overall performance that we can get for natural fiber biocomposites, which in theory are 100% biodegradable. And we can see that compared to the raw polymer is the hexagon that we have at the back, the white one. So that's normalized, that's, having a value of 1, let's say for that. So we can see that we can improve the properties, tensile properties. This is tensile modulus, tensile strength, flexural modulus, impact strength, water absorption. So all the properties were, improved in all of those cases. But we can see that some properties, such as, for instance, flexural strength, can become very much enhanced with the use of this compatibilizer. And we carried out very different processing strategies for biocomposites, such as extrusion, injection, dry blending, compression. So we compared a lot of things just to figure out how feasible was the production of these biocomposites to replace the conventional plastics that we have. So again, criticizing my own work, again, can I call this material fully biodegradable? 100%. And the other question is, okay, if this polymer is biodegradable, how will weathering conditions will promote some changes in the material's integrity? So let's talk about weathering. What is weathering, right? So you can see this picture that we have over here. I'm sorry for that. It's just a wall, with a polymer or acrylic paint, right? So that paint that we have here, as you may have noticed in your houses or in some old buildings in your cities, they start to get old and old and old. So we all age, right? Because of the action of the environment, the incitation of UV light, temperature, humidity, that changes or that promotes a lot of changes at molecular levels. Us, but also in the materials that we have. So how these polymers are going to be affected by weathering conditions. And if this becomes, let's say, a partial biodegradation, what problem is it going to generate if it's not generating a full biodegradation or mineralization into CO2 and water? So we decided to test those two degradation routes or processes, biodegradation or weathering. We tested both of them in the lab, right? So we did that back in 2019 before the pandemic. So just to avoid some greenwashing again, let's just observe this picture, right? So in this picture, we can see that we have before composting a plastic bag or a piece of a plastic bag, right? And after 3 days of composting, we can observe that it's of course changing the morphology that it has. But the question is, just by watching this, can I call the material that fully biodegradable? Is it decomposing into carbon forms that are able to reintegrate into the carbon cycle? Or is it just fragmenting? That's a very interesting question, because maybe we can see a gap of plastic over here. So what happened to it? Did it turn into CO2 and water, or did it just fragment and it's now lost somewhere else, right? Are the conditions that I test in the lab representative of what I can recreate in a real lab, industrial scale end of life scenario? So the conditions that I test in the lab can they be replicated elsewhere in order to assure the degradation of these polymers? If I generate some compost from this product, is it safe to use? Can I grow plants or crops in the compost that I'm using to degrade these plastics? And how much time are they gonna need? So those questions is something that we gotta figure out, and we gotta find the answers every time we are consuming a product that seems to be biodegradable, right? So what's biodegradation really? Okay, so you can see the process. So the process of biodegradation involves a lot of steps in the intermediate. So the first step, of course, is that I can bury samples of PLA or PHAs, polydioxyalkanoates, which, as I said, is another form of biodegradable polymers. So they are just buried in soil, in compost, maybe anaerobic digestion, some end-of-life scenarios to promote the degradation of these polymers. So the first thing is that exists a proliferation of microorganisms. So microorganisms start to proliferate near the sample, and they start to fragmentate the sample. I have something in the chat, I think. Okay, I don't know what's that. Because of the action of microorganisms, but also because of the action of other components, we can start to have some fragmentation. And maybe this fragmentation is what we observed in the last slide, right? We can observe this fragmentation right there. But that's not the end point in a biodegradation process. In the biodegradation process, we need to have complete mineralization. So that means that the sample is completely turning into CO2 and water. But if it's that not happening, of course, how can I know that? Because I know that I have a theoretical CO2 production. And if I'm not, because of the stoichiometry of what's happening over there. So if I'm not reaching that value of theoretical CO2 generated from this emission, this is called respirometric analysis. I cannot call that the biodegradation is happening to a full extent. So the question is, these pieces, these fragments that we have right here are maybe microplastics. So this means that polymers that intended to be biodegradable are just, instead of fully biodegrading, just generating micropioplastics. So this is a very interesting question that I would like to ask in the future, to answer in the future. That's the key research that I would like to develop in these current years. And weathering, on the other side, is the degradation, but not because of microorganisms, but now because of abiotic. If plastic is in the land, in the river, or in the ocean, there's the incidence of UV light, abrasion, salinity, and other factors that are not related or strictly related to the presence of microorganisms, but are generating some extent of degradation in the plastic as well. So this degradation, of course, similarly to the biodegradation, fragments the plastic into smaller fragments, and also generates some changes in its molecular structure. It changes to from high molecular weight change to low molecular weight change. However, the last step, what we saw right here, the complete mineralization, that can actually only happen by the action of some microorganisms. So the assimilation or the mineralization, which are the last steps of biodegradation, happen. We can say that they actually do not happen. It's very rare to observe that. So again, if I have some plastic or bioplastic just, disposed of in water, in rivers or oceans, are they generating microbioplastics because of that incomplete degradation happening because of accelerated or normal weathering? That's another question, right? So this is what we observed experimentally. This is something that's quite giving us some answer of what's happening. So we can see due to the erosion or the fragment loss of weathering, I can see a lot of changes, right? You can see that I'm losing material. But if I do not test that this material is converting into CO2, I actually cannot confirm that it just simply, removed from the surface and it's somewhere else, right? Matter does not create or disappear. It's just transforming into something else. But instead of transforming into CO2, which is mineralization, it's just fragmenting into smaller pieces. So we followed the generation of CO2 by respirometric analysis. And we observed that for the case of PHV or PHVV, we only observed up to 30 or maybe 40% of mineralization percentage, which is compared to the theoretical value that we have due to the stoichiometric analysis. So the question is, why is it not reaching 100%? We said at the beginning it was fully biodegradable. So the answer for that is that this biodegradation in soil or compost of biopolymers is very sensitive to the parameters that we are analyzing. So if I change the temperature a little bit, the microbiome in compost and soil is going to change, and it's going to say, no, I don't want to keep consuming this substrate, right? So that's why mineralization stops. So we need to improve a lot of that. There's some strategies like stimulation or generating the right microbiome that we need to decompose these polymers, to fully decompose them into CO2 and water. This happened after 80 days, right? Maybe you can say, yeah, if you leave them more time, it's going to continue. But you can see that we reach a plateau, right? An asymptotic value that's not growing anymore. So we, get a good amount of degradation after 1 month. It's, maybe 20, and in this case, maybe a little more. So these products are, degrading. They are doing, but if this requires more and more and more time, what's going to happen in the middle of that time, right? So that's the problem associated to microplastics. I don't know how good am I in time. I still have some slides, and I can see I have 32 minutes already. Let me know if I need to go faster, maybe in the chat or something. So plastic waste, we are changing from the macro problem, the one that we observed in oceans, in rivers and all that, to the micro problem. So that means that we're generating extremely small pieces of plastic debris. And the problem with that is that in some cases we are not even able to see it, right? That's the alarms that we are raising with the generation of microplastics. And microplastics, of course, generates from different sources. The main source of that is actually the source of primary microplastics. And a lot of personal care products generate microplastics right from its conception. So we use personal care products, and then through the water stream of our home, they just go into water streams, right? But the other possibility, of course, is through the degradation of microplastics. So the question is, substituting plastics with bioplastics, is that the solution? So that remains to be unanswered. Because, yeah, currently the problem of microplastics is related to having over 51 trillion particles in the ocean. That was estimated by the United Nations. So that means that we will have a lot of these plastics and microplastics in landfills, in environment as well by 2050. So the thing is that those plastics, simply by being exposed to UV radiation, we call that weathering, can produce a lot of small fragments. So look at this number. Just 1 cup of coffee, the one that you get at Starbucks, for instance, of polystyrene, can produce up to 126 million particles in a micro scale. So that's a micro scale that we are not even able to see it. This is in nanometers, right? So those plastics are entering into our food, into the fish that we eat, into bigger bigger animals, into the crops that we are growing in soil. So that's also a problem. And we observed, I actually found this paper before the presentation, that we have microplastics for pets that are affecting our microbiota, right, our gut. So that's the first evidence that something is happening inside us, that we are having microplastics in us. So that, of course, generates some affectations too. Okay, yeah, thank you, I observed that. So that means that we are having some ingestion of those microplastics. They are accumulating in nearby toxins, and they are also spreading other pollutants, right? So the problem that I talked to you about is quite here. And yeah, accumulation in fish, in, all throughout the trophic levels, it's something quite easy to figure out that it's going to happen. However, the other process is not as straightforward as one may think, and it's called dispersion of pollutants. So normally water is not only polluted with plastics and stuff, it's also polluted with some, plaguicides, emerging pollutants, maybe antibiotics, dyes, heavy metals, other, pollutants that are dissolved in water. But what happens is that these microplastics have very high surface area. So through a process that's called adsorption, they're gonna simply bind those plastics, they're gonna sequestrate them from water, and then a fish, thinks this is plankton, eats this microplastic, and maybe in the acid inside of the fish, it's gonna, let the pollutant simply spread into another medium. So that's a quite serious problem. I think I'm just gonna go this presentation or this slide quite fast. Again, it's just that we hardly reach full mineralization in a lot of cases, even in controlled degradation systems. So the question is that maybe biomicroplastics are even more dangerous than microplastics themselves, because the bio part is gonna maybe help them a little bit to bind more other pollutants than normal microplastics do. That's the question that I'm proposing for this picture. And the process through which they bind other pollutants is called adsorption. At the beginning, adsorption is supposed to be working on our side because it's a separation process. We normally develop our own adsorbents to remove some pollutants from water streams. We use that, for instance, in columns, right? Which is an operation unit in which I can remove maybe some pollutants, some heavy metals, some dyes from waters as well. I actually worked a little bit developing porous sorbents. So more specifically, the idea is right here, right? So I developed some porous sorbent that's going to be able to bind some heavy metal. In this case, that was hexavalent chromium. So I can, through a column, absorb or adsorb, as actually the concept or the right concept is, and bind, you know, those pollutants that are commonly present actually in binary mixtures or even more complex mixtures. And normally, if this is a controlled process, I'm going to be able to then spend, you know, my used sorbent somewhere else, right, to dispose of it in a controlled way. But if this is happening in an uncontrolled way, because microplastics being natural sorbents that are occurring in nature, and they are adsorbing these pollutants and maybe releasing them into other, you know, organisms, that's actually a big problem. Yeah, we did that also maybe with cellulose. This happens with a lot of materials. So yeah, I'm just gonna jump now into the conclusion so that we can have some time for the questions. This last part was a little bit of maybe some strategies that we can use also adsorption to work on our side, also to remove microplastics. Or yeah, it might not be the right operation unit for it, but it could be an option. So just the conclusions that I would like to finish with is that through the efforts that we have been doing in the past group where I was and in the group in which I am right now, is that we can figure out some way to develop sustainable management of natural fibers. So if that leads to high performance materials, that of course has a strong niche, you know, in the market, and it's very feasible that they will make the jump into the market. However, not everything that shines is gold. So that means the processes that we're using to generate these transformations may be able to generate more emissions or more environmental impact. So we need to analyze the whole product life cycle analysis. So we need to also avoid greenwashing. Every time that you see that we have a biopolymer or a biodegradable polymer, we really need to analyze if that's really happening. So one of the best conclusions that I can raise from this is that actually recycling is the best end of life scenario for polymer waste, because in that case I can control what's happening during recycling, and I'm avoiding the generation of microplastics or microbioplastics because of having uncontrolled degradation environments. So this one, the last one, is just a question or is some possibility that microplastics or microbioplastics could be even more hazardous due to their chemical functionality. So just to finish, this is the last slide. These are some of the challenges that I would like to approach in my future research and that I'm inviting whoever is interested in to focus on. So it's to develop a methodology for the identification of these microbioplastics. Microplastics normally nowadays, we are kind of able to identify them. So we also need to figure out how can we identify or also characterize the speciation of these microbioplastics and how they are distributing throughout the environment. And analyze the potential sources that we have for this, that may be the uncontrolled facilities that we're using for the biodegradation. And finally, evaluate the potential environmental impact that they might have. So this is also a quite interesting paper that's here that says free but not microplastic free drinking water, you know, with the presence of microbioplastics. So these are kiosks in Mexico City that people just simply fill their water bottles of drink from, and microplastics were found there. So this is a problem that's gonna I think it's exploding right now in media and stuff, but it's gonna become the topic for the next 5 or 10 years. But science is also advancing quite fast, but there are many challenges that we need to solve, right? To figure out what's really the environmental impact and how can we, generate some solutions. So just one more or 10 more seconds. This phrase that I got here is the suggestion or the take home conclusion that I want to raise from this presentation, that not everything that shines is gold. And in the terms of plastics, that's something that happens. Not everything that shines is gold. We need to always criticize our solutions and analyze if they are really providing something that's good for the environment, or maybe generating a problem that's not bigger because it's actually generating smaller particles, but has a stronger impact. So that's it for my presentation. I'm sorry that I talked, I think, 10 minutes more than what was expected, but yeah, I was very happy and very motivated to share with you that. So thank you very much for your attention. Let me know if you got questions.
Thank you, Dr. Martin, Dr. Lopez. Are there any questions from the audience?
Yeah, me. First, thank you for the lecture. I thought it was really interesting. I never stopped to think about like plastics are inert and how do you make them react. I never thought about that. So that was interesting. My question has to do more about what do you think is the future in the industry about their interest about bioplastic? Like we know that greenwashing is a thing right now, but are they gonna shift the focus, or are they shifting it right now towards looking into cleaner and really truly cleaner alternatives for plastic?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Well, this is of course my opinion, and my opinion based on what I've seen in research. And for me, the future is actually what we should have been doing for the last decade, and it's focusing on recycling, right? In having a correct way to capture plastics once their useful life is finished. So we need to be able to capture them, to not, just disposing of them into the lakes, into the ocean. So recycling is, or mechanical recycling of plastics is a process that doesn't have a strong environmental footprint. It uses some degree of energy, but the avoidance of generating more and more and more plastic, it's of course more important than the energy that we have to input to it. However, only depends a lot of the country, but in general in the world, we have a recycling percentage that's below 40%. So we need to raise that up. However, the thing about bioplastics is that they can replace petroleum-based polymers. I think we have to replace them because we have to replace the use of petroleum, that's for sure. But we cannot just say, okay, this is a bioplastic, I do not care what's going to happen to it once it finishes its life. We still need to be active into how are we going to dispose of these polymers. And maybe control facilities, anaerobic digestion, industrial composting, maybe these are options for bioplastics, but recycling needs to have a strong share in how are we managing the end of life of plastics. So maybe a combination, 40% recycling, 30% anaerobic digestion or composting or something like that could be a good option to have a good waste management of these plastics.
I like those numbers. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Are there any more questions from the audience? Also, Dr. Lopez, do you have any contact information if some of the audience would like to email you with questions that they think of?
Yeah, for sure. I think it was at the beginning of my presentation. I think Isabella has my presentation. Maybe she can share with you. I have no problem with that. But this is my email, martin.gles, which is because of my last name, at tech.mx. So yeah, you can contact me at any moment, and yeah, we can figure out if you wanna, learn something, join the research we're doing here in Guadalajara or something like that. That would be an option.
Okay, well, thank you. So yes, we'll get that presentation from you and send that out as a resource for everyone who's attending the conference and also to the people who couldn't make it in person. All right. Are there?
Okay. Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions? If not, we thank you for your time. And all right, now.
Yeah, you're welcome. I was very happy to be here.
Back to you, Audrey.
Carol, could you please allow me to share screen in the backup account?
Okay, sorry, let me. Okay, you should have the permission to share your screen now.
Do you see the presentation now?
Yes.
Okay.
So hello, we are iGEM TecCEM, and our project this year is Hydro Defense, defending crop against disruptors. So basically, we already know that these compounds, endocrine disrupting chemicals, are bad for the human health and for other living beings because they have noxious effect on our health due to the similarities it has with hormones. So based upon this knowledge, we know that in humans specifically, it causes increased incidence of metabolic disorders. For example, it has effects on the adipose tissue, on the pancreas, on the liver, on all of our reproductive systems, both for males and for females. It can cause infertility problems and a lot more issues down the line, especially when it accumulates in our bodies, because they tend to do that. They bioaccumulate. They don't get rid of as easily. Okay, so there's a lot of possible sources for endocrine disrupting chemicals to reach our bodies. First, the sources are plastics, hormone wastes. Those are artificial hormones, of course, textiles, some drugs, and some pesticides as well. All of these chemicals have the capacity to end up in the sewer system if not disposed of correctly. And from the sewer systems, it can end up in water bodies or in treatment plants, which are then end up on, for example, maybe the sea, and it can contaminate marine life. Or in the case of water treatment plants, it can get to irrigated crops via the irrigation water. And from the irrigated crops, it can go directly to humans if we eat those crops, or onto livestock if the livestock is fed with the crops that are contaminated. And all of these sources can end up affecting us directly as humans. But even though there's all these many potential sources, our project this year is mostly focused on irrigated crops. And so we get to our problem agent, which is something that we discussed previously already. EDCs are chemical compounds that are very similarly structured to our hormones. And because of this, they are a little difficult to acutely quantify and to, for example, remove. Because of this, our solution is divided mostly in two projects, which is the biosensor, which allows us to quantify the endocrine disrupting chemicals in water samples, and the enzymatic filter, which is our solution to, for For example, if we detect that a water sample has these chemicals, we can then use our enzymatic filter to degrade those chemicals in the water. And yeah, irrigation of crops with EDCs in Mexico is our main focus.
It would be scarcely possible to get rid of EDCs if not quantifying them with anticipation. Even though many analytical techniques have a bearing on the detection of EDCs, such as high liquid chromatography, optical colorimetric analysis, and other electrochemical methods, these are only complementary between themselves. Some are non-quantifying, besides being quite expensive for the potential users. Consequently, in this first division of the project, a biosensor was developed to know the concentration of these exogenous molecules before and after the disposal of EDCs, exclusively with one integrated system. Our APTA sensor is based on a quartz crystal microbalance technology. This is a balance for small masses. Nevertheless, the piezoelectric gold quartz device would not work without a functional system on it. Therefore, we have designed a strategy for building our microbalance. First and foremost, the protein engineer uses a recombinant hair alpha as a receptor protein, whose aim is to trap different types of EDC. This protein was improved and functionalized by adding histidine tag for an easier purification, and a linker in our genetic sequence to ensure its binding to chitosan, a stable biocompatible polymer chosen for its polarity to set out on a specific rotation of the biomolecule. Moreover, gold nanoparticles were synthesized and applied with one and only purpose: to amplify and enhance the signal of the piezoelectric, this by working as little extensions. Finally, the system was successfully assembled by applying a sustained superficial modification to the gold electrode with the help of cyclic voltammetry. We like to think of it as links, congregating piece by piece. But however, how does it truly work? The piezoelectric is provided with an electronic signal. Afterwards, another one comes out, which is received by the microcontroller to measure its frequency shift. What is the task of the user? It is pretty simple to use. You only need to pass the sample through the TecCEM, and molecules by themselves will confine by virtue of the previous treatment applied. Depending on how insofar mass will the crystal collect, the variation of the frequency will be great. The engineered solution has been previously made by many. However, we are enthusiastic to make even more convenient. This is why we have developed an unorthodox, easy to visualize app. Not only has a human-machine interface, but turning our system into a wireless portable mechanism. Comes in hand that our device will represent a huge step forward as a groundbreaking detection and quantifying system. But now, how are we dealing with EDCs?
We did not hear anything.
¿Lo apagaste, va?
Okay, sorry, a small mic issue here. So now we're going to go around on the effects of EDCs on plants, which are many, and they're kind of problematic in this situation because EDCs are bioaccumulative, and there's various routes for this. So as was previously mentioned, the source of these EDCs will from irrigated water, and when they arrive to the plants, they can bioaccumulate. And well, the forms of bioaccumulation can be throughout the roots, can be throughout the leaves. There's many sources for this bioaccumulation. Now, when these EDCs are in the plant, they have many effects. They can change the color, they can change the size of the plant from the roots, they can change the size of the leaves, it can change many things. It can even affect the whole metabolism system of the plant. It can change all the nutritional system of the plant, even the nutritional values of the plant. There can be cell damage in some more extreme cases, and even some oxidative stress, and also to very, very serious cases, there could be death of the whole plant. Here we can see, and as you may remember in the previous presentation that Jeanette just gave us, this is the effects of BPA, of bisphenol A on plants. This is particularly on roots of corn. Here we can see two types of roots, normal roots and then roots that are affected by BPA. So as we can see, they're considerably smaller roots. And there can also be a reduced stem growth. They can the stomatal size, which is by where they cap the CO2 and they also release the oxygen, can be reduced because of these EDCs. The leaves also can get to be shorter, of more yellow or brownish colors. There could be reduction of chlorophyll. These brownish or yellow colors on the leaves, even black if there's already necrosis, is directly related to chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B, because there's reduction of chlorophyll when there's high levels of EDCs on these plants. So if we pass to the next image, we can see here a little bit of this. This is what I was talking about, the stomatal sizes. They can be reduced by the effects of EDCs. Here we can see these are veins that are being completely damaged because of the EDCs. This is also as well with BPA. And also we can see in the last set of images, the effect of necrosis on leaves. Why all this is problematic? Because it's not just a plant dying right now. This is a whole situation because there's a big economical impact. Particularly, we were exploring here in Mexico and with farmers, which we're going to see further ahead with our integrated human practices. What are the effects and consequences of all this? But just thinking of in the very simple way, if you have a plant that's smaller, that has less value and nutritional value, or that's even dying, that's going to cost less in the market. And that's going to have an impact, a direct impact on the farmers, which, well, no one wants to really buy products. These are situations that's already happening here in Mexico with species of corn. Mexico is one of the countries that most corn consume, but funny enough, the corn doesn't come from Mexico because the nutritional value of corn is reduced because of many factors, pesticides, EDCs, and that's why, well, as you can see in this whole context, it can be a great deal in economical terms, which we'll see further ahead. Sorry for kidnapping the mic.
Undoubtedly, our project will not be complete without a method that not only allows us to detect EDCs, but also to eliminate them. Therefore, we have designed a method that helps to that. It's a system that properly accomplishes to this task. Its design is based on an immobilized enzyme based on a trapping system that its compounds is a zeolite. What is a zeolite? Well, it's a mineral composed of aluminum and silicon that has a hollow box shape, such as the one that we can see over here. This allows fluids flow through them, and this has the cage role since they contain the immobilized enzyme of them. This has which will be locked into the zeolite and will be in straight contact with the water of sample, carrying out the degradation work without worrying about the external factors. The resulting material will be added into the sample we want to clean directly. So now, what are the outcomes that we are searching right now?
First and foremost, a notable endocrine disruptor elimination that are found in irrigation water and its conversion into less toxic compounds. Yeah. into less toxic compounds thanks to the zeolite cage when immobilized lacase. Compounds such as bisphenol are degraded by lacase into quinones, which are known that have lower estrogenic activity and less stability, which characteristics can help to sorry. Okay. That and have less stability, a characteristic that makes them more susceptible for their thorough degradation. Additionally, immobilized in zeolite is realized expanding the retention and enhance of lacase stability, the improve of the reutilization cycle, and the intensifying of the degradation work. Lastly, we are developing a mathematical model in order to simulate this degradation work. The importance of this simulation is that it helps us to understand the behavior of the lacase when it is immobilized, and also allow us to compare when it is by itself and determine if the immobilized enhance the enzyme activity. Furthermore, this model will let us know how long it will take for the enzyme to degrade these interacting disruptors. Let me change the, okay. And these endocrine disruptors in the irrigation water conditions, and let us evaluate the effect of the flux of water and the mass transfer in the lacase activity. This is why we are taking great care in the correct definition of kinetic equation as parameter, as the enzyme Michaelis constant and activity and inactivity constants. But our impact had not finished yet. We have gone further. Let's hear about it with Melchor.
Yeah, so for our human practices, we had to leave the lab and identify how the EDCs pass to our crops. Also, we had to identify our internal and external stakeholders in order to make activities and work around them. And those, we did some activities like interviews with expert governmental authorities and agronomists. Also, we did some disclosure on the effects of EDCs through podcast and social media. And also we did some environmental care volunteering in order to know how the crops affect these agronomists. And also we were able to estimate the economic impact of our project. Running our estimated change in quality through the elimination of EDCs, we were able to run it through a simulation made by Coneval. And we were able to estimate that the income that these farmers will get from getting rid of EDCs is from 15% to 25%. But you may be wondering why would these farmers get an increase in their income? Well, when EDCs are degraded, the production increases and also the prices, since the quality of these crops get better when EDCs are not present in their irrigation water. And this results in about 2% reduction in agricultural workers that live in extreme poverty, and also 1.5% of agricultural workers that live in poverty, which means that our project will have an impact, a positive impact, and in society, specifically in the agricultural worker section. And this project will be able to support the extremely poor agricultural workers.
And with all of this, we see the importance of relating to others, to meet, to learn, to help, to contribute to our planet. We know there is a long way ahead of us to reduce the impact of EDCs, but we invite you to take the first steps with us and see bigger and further in the future. Be part of the solution, and together we will see how micro leads to macro.
Thank you so much, TecCEM. Wonderful presentation. All right. Well, I think everybody who attended, thank you for attending. It has been about 4 hours since our conference started. So unless there's any urgent questions, are you, Audrey and Katerina, are you good with us ending the conference soon?
We can hear you well, Carol. Can you repeat it, please?
Oh, I was going to say thank you so much for presenting. And the conference has gone on for about 4 hours now. So if your team and Katerina and anybody in the audience, if unless there's any more questions, we can just end the session here.
I think there are no more questions, so yeah, we can end the session here.
All right, thank you so much. And anybody who is might be watching the recording, thank you again. And we hope to have another bioremediation conference next year. All right.
Thanks, Carol. See you. Hey, thanks to all for attending.